Who did we consider cray-cray until history proved them right all along? Harry Markopoulos spent years trying to convince everyone, investors, journalists, regulatory agencies and stuff, that Bernie Madoff was a fraud based on forensic accounting. Madoff was one of the most respected names on Wall Street, and despite the overwhelming evidence, nobody was willing to entertain the thought he might be running a Ponzi scheme. Harry's book, No One Would Listen, is a great account of financial detective work and just the abject frustration of being absolutely certain you're right, but nobody believing you. If it ever comes out that we're in a simulation, this guy being named Madoff will be the Easter egg I point to when I convince people that the devs used interns from time to time. Ludwig Boltzmann. His equations and formulas explained the physical properties of matter, but as it went against the accepted laws of physics at the time, he was ridiculed and ignored for years while fighting for atom theory to be accepted. Sadly, he self-deleted just 3 years before Ernest Rutherford discovered the nucleus of an atom, proving Boltzmann's theory. Ignaz Semmelweis. That guy who suggested that it might be a good idea to wash your hands before performing surgery. Semmelweis supposedly suffered a nervous breakdown and was committed to an asylum by his colleagues. He died 14 days later after being beaten by guards from a gangrenous wound on his right hand, which might have been caused by the beating. Semmelweis's practice earned widespread acceptance only years after his death, when Louis Pasteur confirmed the germ theory. Hemingway, before he finally ended things himself, became extremely paranoid the FBI was following him. His wife and people around him just thought he was mentally ill and grew deeply concerned. Hemingway went as far as getting electrotherapy at a psychiatric hospital to try and help with the perceived delusions. Turns out the FBI had been following and bugging him for years according to declassified files. In comparison, there was the sci-fi writer Philip K. Dick, who was convinced that the FBI was monitoring him, so he kept sending demand letters that they release his file. His daughter was interviewed years after he passed away. It was in the bonus features of the Scanner Darkly DVD, if I recall correctly. The interviewer said, "I heard you've actually seen your father's FBI file, and it's quite large." Yes, it is rather large, but the only thing in there are copies of his demand letters. On the other hand, Hemingway was being relentlessly surveyed for 20 years because of his perceived socialist tendencies, and although he may have been paranoid, that doesn't mean that he was wrong. In the days of landlines, my phone was tapped. I could hear a strange hollow sound and I knew someone was listening. I'd had a bad accident and was home for almost a year and involved in a lawsuit. I told my attorney about it. He told me the insurance company wouldn't bother. I mentioned it to my roommate. She told me I was crazy. I began to notice a van parked on my street. It was there for several days. I thought I was under surveillance. My attorney and roommate said I was crazy. A person came to my door asking questions about the neighborhood. They claimed to be from a real estate company. They didn't go to the other houses. I thought I was being watched. My attorney and roommate said I was crazy. Several weeks later, my roommate's boyfriend was arrested for stealing physical and intellectual property from IBM. It was the beginning of the tech era, and he stole millions in hardware and software and ideas. We were being watched to see if we were involved. The phone was tapped. We were under surveillance. We were taped. I wasn't crazy at all, just wrong about why they were doing it. In 1912, the meteorologist Alfred Wegener described what he called continental drift, an idea that culminated 50 years later in the modern theory of plate tectonics. Wegener expanded his theory in his 1915 book, The Origin of Continents and Oceans, starting from the idea, also expressed by his forerunners, that the present continents once formed a single landmass, later called Pangaea. Wegener suggested that these separated and drifted apart, likening them to icebergs of low-density granite floating on a sea of denser basalt. Supporting evidence for the idea came from the dovetailing outlines of South America's coast and Africa's west coast, and from the matching rock formations along these edges. Confirmation of their previous contiguous nature also came from the fossil plants Glossopteris and Gangomopteris, and the therapsid or mammal-like reptile Lystrosaurus, all widely distributed over South America, Africa, Antarctica, India, and Australia. The evidence for such an erstwhile joining of these continents was patent to field geologists working in the Southern Hemisphere. The South African Alex de Trois put together a mass of information in his 1937 publication Our Wandering Continents, and went further than Wegener in recognizing the strong links between the Gondwana fragments. Wegener's work was initially not widely accepted, in part due to a lack of detailed evidence. The Earth might have a solid crust and mantle and a liquid core, but there seemed to be no way that portions of the crust could move around. Distinguished scientists, such as Harold Jeffreys and Charles Schuchert, were outspoken critics of continental drift. Oh, that poor lady originally quoted as saying, "The dingo ate my baby." Got made fun of constantly, most notably in Seinfeld, The Simpsons, and I believe she went to jail because nobody believed her. Turns out, a dingo did eat her baby. She's still made fun of. This one is beyond messed up. Your child is taken from you by wild animals, then you're jailed for murdering your own kid and ridiculed the world over for your lame story as to what happened. And then, yeah, being right the whole time. For a very long time, the medical community thought that stomach ulcers were caused by stress. A doctor in Australia called Barry Marshall claimed they were wrong and that they were caused by an excess of certain bacteria, and the cure was simply antibiotics. The medical community ridiculed him and nearly ended his career. He eventually decided that the only way to prove he was right was to infect himself, develop the ulcers, and cure himself. In curing himself, he was proved right and won the Nobel Prize for his efforts, and now stomach ulcers are very easily treatable. They previously affected 1 in 10 people. What's sad about these stories is that somebody coming up with a theory like that seems to be exactly the sort of thing which should excite medical professionals, as it's not only challenging their views, but also proposing a more effective solution. It's easy for me to be wise in hindsight, but it isn't as if he was advising people to rub a rabbit's ears and the good vibes would make the ulcers go away. Courtney Love was warning everyone about Harvey Weinstein back in the late 90s, but everyone just wrote her off. She said, "If you're a woman in this industry and Weinstein invites you to one of his parties, don't go." I fully believe that most of the rumors and bad press about Courtney Love come from Hollywood attempting to silence her. Don't get me wrong, I don't think she's a saint, but she's been very vocal on social media about her experiences over the last few years, and I always wonder if we would have known about the Hollywood stuff sooner if she had been given a platform earlier. The fan that predicted the show How I Met Your Mother's message and was shamed only to be proved completely right in the finale. J. Harlan Bretz. He was a geologist that in the 1920s came up with a theory about why Dry Falls and the surrounding scablands of eastern Washington state were so sharp and abrupt, instead of smooth as should be with the general understanding of erosion, especially since the falls have no real river to speak of to create erosion. His theory was that a giant flood, created by an even more massive lake, ripped through the region millions of years ago, reshaping the landscape in a matter of days. He was laughed at and discredited in the geology community for almost 50 years, until someone discovered evidence in the 1950s of an ancient and massive lake that started just north of Montana that stretched all the way to southern Utah. The lake was believed to have been created by glacial dams or ice walls during the last ice age. It would fill up over thousands of years and then hit a point where the glacial dam broke, and the lake water would fire out the beak like a water cannon, drain the lake, and reshape the entire region over several days as the water flowed towards the ocean. This happened several times. Since the flood that carved the Dry Falls likely started from the Lake Missoula area in modern-day Montana, it was named the Great Missoula Flood. Bretz was given an award in 1979 for his contribution to geology when he was 96 years old. He joked, "All of my enemies are dead, so I have no one to gloat to." Martha Mitchell. She was the wife of Nixon's AG, John Mitchell. She was outspoken in the extreme and was one of the first to talk openly about what really happened around Watergate. Since she was also known to love her martinis, she was widely written off as a crazy drunk woman. She was kidnapped by Nixon's personal lawyer and injected with tranquilizers to keep her quiet. Later, behind the scenes, a White House doctor began heavily sedating her, and her husband locked her away from the press. Nobody believed her until Nixon resigned and the story came out. To this day, most people only really remember her as that loudmouth Martha Mitchell. Nobody was ever prosecuted for how she was treated because they wanted the nation to heal after Watergate and enter into a new era of bipartisanship. So guys like Roger Stone got away with it. See, that all worked out well. Yep, good thing we fully closed that partisan gap forever. Don't worry, Martha Mitchell, your subjugation paved the way to… Actually, it's better that you don't see what we have now. When the Civil War broke out, everyone on both sides thought it would be a quick victory. However, Sherman kept saying that it would be a bloodbath that would drag on for years. His superiors decided he was insane and sent him out west to fight the Indians or Native Americans just to get rid of him. After it all came true and they needed some better generals, they said, maybe we should bring back that Sherman guy. Yes, public opinion is rarely kind towards realists or pessimists during wars. During the American Revolutionary War, the British also felt the same towards Cassandras like General Gage and later Clinton. One was sacked and the other's army was denuded in favor of Cornwallis. Rather than accept a war of attrition, the British government preferred foolhardy yet aggressive generals like Burgoyne and Cornwallis and reaped the consequences. Before World War II, Japanese ultranationalists wanted to assassinate Admiral Yamamoto, the successful planner of Pearl Harbor, because he kept saying inconvenient truths like, "In 6 months, the Americans will overwhelm us," since America can easily outproduce Japan's manufacturing capacities and rebuild massive fleets. Jon Snow, and yes, that is his name. He was laughed at for believing that multiple cholera outbreaks could be traced back to a specific source and that it was due to contaminated water, essentially making him one of the fathers of epidemiology. He has a fascinating life that went beyond that as well. The Radium Girls. When radium had just come to the US and was being marketed on dials for war and watches, girls used their lips to fix the paintbrushes to make their numbers and dials perfect. Eventually, they started suffering horrible, painful experiences due to the radium. These girls fought for years to figure out A, what was wrong with them, B, who was responsible, and C, how they were going to pay their bills and support their families. It's a horrible injustice. These girls needed support and validation that they weren't crazy, that it was radium, and it took far too long and too many deaths for it to finally happen. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was in Boy Scout camp, we had this counselor named Don. He was kind of odd. He knew everything about trees and only really talked about trees. We'd just gotten back from a hike that Don was on with us, and we were just sitting around talking, and he suddenly goes, "You know, they're going to let girls into the Boy Scouts soon." And we were all like, "Yeah, okay, Don." But sure enough, less than 3 years later, they did it. Michael Burry, the first guy to predict the 2008 housing market crash. He was a hedge fund manager for Scion Capital at the time, and basically bet his entire fund's liquidity, like all the money the fund had, that there'd be a crash. Nobody believed him except for a few other people who also bet against the market. Several of his clients sued him for tying their money up in what they considered to be a foolish bet, all to have him be right in the end. He made his fund something like $1.3 billion, and the value increased about 489%. The movie The Big Short is all about him and the few other people who were wise enough to bet against the market at the time. I've watched it like 5 times in order to try to understand exactly what happened, but I still don't fully get it. I recommend it to anyone who's interested. Fun fact, but Michael Burry was also ahead of the curve in the recent GameStop surge. I think he had something like 1.2 million shares of GameStop months before the price shot up. I might need to fact-check myself, though. The ex-husband of my ex-girlfriend. Turns out he wasn't the crazy one after all. He kept trying to tell me, and if I would have listened from the beginning, I could have saved 4 years of my life. The classic example, of course, is Cassandra. In Greek mythology, she was cursed to know the future, but for no one to believe her when she told them the truth. Johnny Rotten said in an interview that he knew Jimmy Savile was into all kinds of, quote, seediness. People dismissed it as typical Johnny Rotten anti-establishment talk for which he was famous. As it turned out, he was right. Joe Canseco. He revealed that a bunch of baseball players like Mark McGwire, Rafael Palmeiro, and a few others were doing performance-enhancing substances. Nobody believed him for years until everyone else got caught doing those exact substances. About 10 years ago, there was this stoner who'd always hang around the shop that I played Magic the Gathering at. One day, he told me that he didn't trust Jared from Subway. I said there was nothing to worry about, and the only thing that Jared did was eat sandwiches. He said there was something real sinister about Jared, and that he could tell just by looking at him. Well, he was right. I was right about my now disowned cousin. He kept stealing from me, which was why my family felt it was no big deal. But it escalated. It went from stealing candy, to my things, to cash, and after that I asked them how much longer they'd support him and call me selfish for, quote, not sharing. The line was finally crossed when he stole our grandmother's credit cards and her car. She finally wrote him off the will. This was after he'd stolen all of her jewelry, including the last present, an anniversary ring, that my grandfather was ever to give her. Oh, but he tried to say that our family kicked him out just because he was gay. No, none of us cared about that. It was because he was a thief. His friends have bailed him out of jail and then dropped him when he steals from them, but he claims the world is just unfair to him. Now he milks his pity story and milks the "my family disowned me because I'm gay" story to everyone he begs from. I learned this when he tried to do it to one of my friends. Corey Feldman. The guy went on national TV to tell everyone that there was a network of people taking advantage of young up-and-comers in Hollywood and that he himself had been taken advantage of in the worst way. And people laughed at him and shunned him. And then it came out that pretty much everything he was saying was true. The people who were tortured as part of MKUltra. Imagine trying to convince the people around you that the government is trying to make you crazy with mind control, only for years later to find out that not only was it true, but that you wouldn't get compensation for it, and you were subject to illegal human experimentation. The people who discovered prions. All the other biologists thought they were crazy to suggest one protein could be an infectious agent. Nope, those biologists were wrong and Nobel Prizes were awarded. See, despite these scientists getting shamed up until they're vindicated, I'm at least somewhat happy that once the community is proven wrong, they tend to actually dispense rewards and grants and things, unlike just quietly removing these people and never talking about them again. Sinead O'Connor. Young Redditors might not know who she is, but she was a singer-songwriter from Ireland who was a staple in the alternative music scene during the late 80s and early to mid-90s, who had some crossover hits. Anyway, at the height of her popularity, she was the musical guest on Saturday Night Live after cancelling an earlier scheduled spot in protest against the guest host, which was some dumb idiot stand-up comic from the 80s called Andrew Dice Clay, who was described by Scott Thompson as, "It's as if someone took your grandmother, the one who can't speak English, and taught her to swear phonetically, gave her a special on HBO and made her a star." Anyway, during Sinead's performance, she sang an a cappella version of Bob Marley's War, changing the lyrics to make it about the mistreatment of children instead of racism. At the end of the performance, she shouted something like, "Fight the real enemy," and ripped up a picture of the Pope. In the following weeks, people lost their minds, and on the next episode of Saturday Night Live, they had at least 3 sketches that tore her apart. A few years later, the Catholics scandal broke out internationally. Mainstream culture in the 90s was intense. It wasn't that far removed from satanic panic levels. Bart Simpson was legitimately considered a danger to family values, parents were protesting Mortal Kombat, those parental advisory stickers were introduced for music, and churches were still considered morally infallible. The progress still happening now with transparency into the Catholic Church, Boy Scouts and stuff, would have been unfathomable at the time. There was that one journalist, Gary Webb, who uncovered the truth that the CIA aided and abetted Nicaraguan Contra rebels in funneling white snow into inner-city communities. My mum. Turns out being emo really was just a phase. The people who said that the government was indeed spying on its citizens. The doctor who found COVID in China was arrested and then later died in a quarantine hospital after developing complications from COVID. My wife, who never liked my mum's husband. He apparently made a pass at her before we were married, and I just wrote it off as Bob being Bob, because it was honestly semi-innocent, and at the time he and my mum were newlyweds. But over the years we started finding out he was hitting my mother, he made a pass at my sister, he was constantly cheating on my mum, he got caught trying to take a stealthy picture of my friend's underage sister, and he punched my mum in the head outside on the ice, causing her to hit her head on the pavement, fracturing her skull, and causing an almost fatal brain hemorrhage. She needed 2 surgeries and now deals with balance issues and almost complete loss of taste and smell and hearing in one ear. He's never faced any consequences for anything, because for reasons I can't quite understand, local law enforcement officers in their podunk town take his side every time she calls the cops on him. One time they even took her to jail because his drunk butt fell in a walk-in pantry where they were having an argument and he called the cops and said she beat him up. He's literally twice her size. He's moved out and they're getting a divorce now. I haven't kicked his butt because I live 1,000 miles away, I don't know where he lives, and I'm the sole breadwinner for my wife and 2 daughters. If I go to jail, they'll become homeless. My mum doesn't want him in jail yet because he pays the bills, and if he stops working, she loses her much-needed health insurance and her home. The divorce trial is just around the corner, and my sister and friend's sister have agreed to testify against him. So we're going to see how that goes. In the 2012 presidential debates between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama, both were asked what the greatest foreign threats to America were. Mitt Romney said Russia and became the butt of jokes on both sides of the aisle for it. Didn't he know the Cold War was over? Anyway, there's plenty about the guy I don't like, but I think about that answer a surprising amount as politics unfurl now. I almost feel like I'd have to apologize if I ever met him for how stupid I and everyone else found him at the time. My tattoo artist, not a Donald Trump follower, who during a 6-hour session described to me exactly what would happen if Biden won, but not by a landslide. I thought he was embracing a doomsday mentality. Every word was correct. Weird Al. He's actually a very wholesome, healthy guy with tons of energy and nobody can say anything negative about him. One of our D&D party members was hiding in a tree when the rest of the party was trying to negotiate, and we got captured except the one in the tree. Learned recently that my grandpa was right all along. My grandpa was a dentist. He mentored my current dentist. Saw my dentist the other day and he was going on and on about how my grandpa was doing things 40 years ago that he was mocked for endlessly by the dental community and told he was crazy. Those things my crazy grandpa were doing are now being seen as modern dentistry today. My dentist said he feels so happy for my grandpa and wishes he was alive to see this. The famous Swift quote applies: "When a true genius appears in the world, you may know him by this sign, that the dunces are all in confederacy against him." Had to Google this to find out that it was in fact Jonathan Swift who quoted this, not Taylor. Unfortunately, we can't make this saying common knowledge because then every idiot conspiracy theorist in the world will feel bolstered by the knowledge that they are the one true genius. 2007 Britney Spears when she cut her hair. We thought she was nuts then. She could be, I don't follow her news, but after the stuff in 2020, we can all probably relate in some way. I kept telling people that Apple deliberately sabotages their phones to stop working over time via their updates, and that it doesn't matter if you reject the update, it will happen anyway. And lo and behold, Apple was caught out using planned obsolescences via updates to sabotage their own phones to twist its customers' arms into buying new ones. They said I was being paranoid. Well, who's paranoid now, Laura? Who's paranoid now? Congresswoman Barbara Lee was the only congressperson out of 535 members who voted no on the Authorized Use of Military Force Act after the September 11th attacks. There were also 12 present or not voting recorded. In her words, it was a blank check to the president to attack anyone involved in the September 11th event, anywhere in any country without regard to our nation's long-term foreign policy, economic and national security interests, and without time limit. In granting these overly broad powers, the Congress failed its responsibility to understand the dimensions of its declaration. I could not support such a grant of war-making authority to the president. I believe it would put more innocent lives at risk. The president has the constitutional authority to protect the nation from further attack, and he has mobilized the armed forces to do just that. The Congress should have waited for the facts to be presented and then acted with fuller knowledge of the consequences of our action. For her vote, she received death threats, a damaged political career, and she was called insane, a traitor, and a communist. And she was 100% right. What public interaction made you want to rage quit the human race? I was seated in the back of a restaurant, which was pretty quiet. About halfway through my meal, an elderly couple sat in front of me. 10 minutes or so after they were seated, 2 men, in their early 20s maybe, sat down with them, obviously another couple. One of them was clearly the child of the elderly couple because, well, he called them Mom and Dad. Anyway, upon sitting down, the old people's kid introduced his boyfriend to them. Initially, the parents didn't know their kid was gay, from what I gather, because the dad became very angry and the mother actually started to cry. They said things like, "Where did we go wrong?" and "Being gay is a sin." Things like I'd expect homophobic parents to say to their gay kid, but somehow I didn't really think they ever would. The guy's parents left in a storm and he started crying. Not bawling, but some tears. His boyfriend consoled him and whatnot, and they paid and left without finishing their meal. I, of course, stared because the dad was nearly shouting, which I don't feel bad about because it allowed me to give the dad an absolute look of disgust as he left. The whole thing ruined my day. I'm eating Sonic next time and staying in my homophobe-free car. I was a waitress when I was 18. I worked one Father's Day and this old man was seated in my section. He didn't order anything because he said he was waiting for his children. He was dressed real nice and had this big smile on his face. After about 15 minutes, I asked him if he wanted an appetizer or anything while he waited. He was looking less happy at this point and he said no, he'd just wait for his kids. I ended up talking to him quite a bit between taking care of other tables. He hadn't seen his children in over 25 years and they'd promised they'd be there that day. He waited for an hour and a half. They never showed. When he left, he was crying silently and hadn't eaten anything. I used to work at a wildlife company at the local mall. You know, rain sticks, statues, Yanni CDs. One day, a little boy came in wanting to buy his mum a present. He was around 7 or 8 years old, I'd say. The kid wanted to buy a present for his mum and had a handful of assorted bills and change. We counted his money to see how much he had, and I took him around the store and showed him different things he could afford to buy. As we were looking, he saw a coffee mug with a nature scene on it that he loved, but he didn't have quite enough money for it. He only had about $5 and some change. I told him to go ahead and get it, and I chipped in some of my own money to make up the difference. He left the store smiling. A little while later, this angry woman came dragging the kid back into the store. She slammed the mug on the counter and insisted on an immediate refund. I thought she was just mad because I helped the kid spend his money on something. But then after I gave her back the money, she grabbed the kid by the hand and dragged him quickly out of the store, fussing at him saying, "Why would you buy me something like that? I'd never use something like that." My heart broke a little. Oh man, I guess this is going to be one of those sad videos, isn't it? I guess I'd better steel my soul and resolve not to be like these people. For the record, most of our parents are wonderful about pretending to like the garbage we get them when we're small kids. I used to babysit a couple of kids and their mum developed a big drinking problem. She kept vodka in a water bottle. A friend or relative or someone, I don't remember who, it was a long time ago, they went to grab her bottle from her and the daughter, who was about 6, leapt to mum's defense, yelling at the friend, "You can't take it, that's mummy's special water. She needs it to make her feel better." That girl would be about 15 now and I haven't seen her in years, but I can't help but wonder about how much she's worked out now about what was going on back then. I was eating in a Mexican restaurant and there was a family arguing next to me. The teenage daughter was crying while her father told her he'd always put his new wife, who was sitting next to him looking smug, before her. From what I heard, the poor girl had been kicked out of her home because she wasn't getting along with her stepmom. Ah, the old, let's break the news in a restaurant, they won't make a scene trick, famous for decades as a breakup method. It never works. I once saw 2 young groups of boys fundraising on 2 medians as cars passed. One was white, in some kind of sports team and scout uniform, and the other was black, I think with group t-shirts fundraising for sports uniforms. The white group was clearly making bank and the black one not doing well. I could see the black group leaders trying to hide their disgust and be optimistic, but it was awful. My car gave them $10 and they were really thankful for it, but it just wasn't enough to make up for having to stand there and experience the huge disparity. You could especially see some of the older kids who got it, looking like they wanted to give up. When I worked at GameStop, I was a lowly grunt organizing video games. Suddenly, this bigger lady with a cane came in with an opened Xbox 360, demanding a full cash refund even though the system was used, open, missing the game it should have come with, and some sauce was on the system. GameStop's policy is, if you open it, it's yours. Turns out her son had stolen her disability money that they rely on for food and rent, came to the mall and used all of it on the video game system. She was at the point of tears because we couldn't help her. Meanwhile, her son kept grabbing different games and was adding them to the counter, demanding that we ring them out for him because she was paying. The look on her face was incredibly sad, like her soul had been snatched away. My manager ended up giving her an 80% refund even though they'd kept the system for more than 2 months. As she walked out of the store dragging her bawling 12-year-old with her walking condition, it was painful to watch. I was at Walmart a couple of years ago looking for something in the electronics department. Walked up to the checkout stand just as the cashier took a personal phone call. All of a sudden she lets out this awful scream and just completely loses it, sobbing and crying. Everyone is standing there in shock. One of her co-workers came over to comfort her and I went on my way. Turns out she just found out her husband died in an accident. To this day, that sticks in my mind as the saddest thing I've ever seen. A group of us went to a bar for lunch. The hostess seats us next to 2 well-dressed middle-aged men and a well-dressed middle-aged woman. The woman is sobbing. We all think they've just told her that someone's died and are quiet out of respect to her. After a couple of minutes of this awkward quiet with the sobbing woman, one of the men grabs her hand and says quite loudly, "Not everyone believes in Scientology, Jeannie." My whole table lost it. Our high school marching band got hired to perform a private parade through a neighborhood, ending with a concert at a man's house. I was a freshman at the time, and I remember how we made our horn arc and played as the guy and his wife stood outside. The wife had her arms crossed and unsmiling, just glaring at us and him the entire time. We found out after that the guy had apparently cheated on her with the babysitter and was trying to make it up to her. I'm not sure how he thought a crappy marching band concert at 9 a.m. was going to make up for that. My mum told me about one time when we went out to McDonald's when I was little. A man had sat down with his meal at a table and left to get ketchup. A woman with her kids sat down at the table and she threw his uneaten meal away. The guy came back and just stared at the table where his food had been and walked away. The saddest part was that the man looked homeless. It was probably his only meal that day. I saw a young child run up to his dad, crying and trying to hug the dad and all. The dad just kicks him off and says, "Frick off, you little brat." I wanted to punch the dude for it. Neglect is horrid. Damn. As a non-violent man who's never started a physical altercation and has lost every fight he's ever been in, I have a very strong urge to punch this guy who I've never met. God damn, some people suck. One time sticks out in my mind. Once while attending a convention at a casino, I was leaving and I saw a woman dragging her young kid in tow. He was crying his eyes out and I heard him say, "Mommy, you're not supposed to gamble anymore or we won't be able to afford food," or something to that extent. Poor little kid even knew she had a problem. School talent show, a young woman who was very shy had managed to get up the courage to sing a song. I can't remember the song, but it was a big one. She didn't have the voice for it and she lost the audience about 20 seconds in, whilst people started laughing and shouting things. They closed the curtain on her in the middle of her performance. I saw a first grader pee his pants on a field trip because his teacher wouldn't let him go to the bathroom. He then told everyone that he spilled his cereal on himself that morning and it was still wet. That first grader was me. I worked in a lumberyard here a long time ago. This man came in with his son and the kid had ratty clothes on, looked like his dad had just made him work all the time. The kid was about 10 years old. His shoes had holes in them and he just wasn't looking like he was well taken care of. So the radio was on and it was near Christmas and the kid asked about Santa because there was Christmas music on. The dad turns to the kid and says, "I frickin' killed Santa Claus, so don't worry about it." The kid at that point looked like he'd taken on all he could and started crying, and his dad told him not to cry like a woman and made him keep helping load his truck. The father even asked me not to help load anything because his son needed help learning to be a man. Just because some people might be interested like I was, if they were wondering if I did anything, because it looks like the kid was maybe in deep trouble at home or something, I copied the guy's invoice from the computer, and since he comes in a lot, I asked my boss if he'd seen the guy do this stuff before. It turns out he's part of this weird cult here in Wisconsin. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Tina was one of those horse girls. Every school has one, socially inept but a bit too in love with horses. Sad to say, even the kindest of kids began to make fun of her when she started to wear a saddle to school. One day in geography, the door burst open suddenly. It was Horse Girl's dad. He grabbed her by the hair and proceeded to scream the hell out of her. She did nothing but silently weep and stroke her plastic pony's hair. Turns out he was angry because she was learning about different countries in school. Police were called and she was escorted out. We never saw her again. Even us idiot 7th graders realized that her horse obsession was an escape from her awful father. We made things worse and we never had the chance to apologize. I don't know if she's dead or alive, or if alive, whether she's able to have anything approaching a fruitful life. One of my jobs is at a liquor store. This woman and her young 9-ish-year-old daughter used to come in almost every day. The woman always had some sob story about not having enough money, but always had $6 for her 3 tall cans of Bud Light. The daughter usually had enough for a piece of candy too. One day they came in and the kid was paying in nickels and dimes as usual and could only afford 2 beers. The daughter was short on her candy money, so I gave her 35 cents or whatever so she could afford her candy bar. Mum comes up to the counter as I'm ringing the kid up, immediately snatches the girl's money and uses it to buy her third beer. She frickin' stole the money I gave to the kid to buy candy to buy herself another frickin' tall can. The poor kid sucked it up like it was nothing. I assume it was pretty much par for the course in her family. I normally don't approve of violence against women, but I wanted to deck the mum. We had other customers in the store, and I didn't want to cause a confrontation in front of the kid, so I let it pass. The next day, Mum comes in alone and I let her have it with both barrels. Refused her service, chewed her out for stealing from her daughter and myself, told her to never come back. I normally don't call customers alky C-words either, but this time I made an exception. My high school had mainstreamed special ed kids. Basically, 1 or 2 special ed kids would be in normal English or humanities classes, the theory being that they picked up some social skills and the other kids learn that special ed people aren't mythological punchlines. This translated to a lot of the special ed kids wandering around the campus at lunch, which was alright, they were all pretty high-functioning, so it wasn't like they ran around screaming or strangling rabbits. One kid in particular was about 6'3" and chubby, constantly wore short shorts and just sort of wandered around being friendly. Everyone knew him on sight, and one day I caught sight of this kid, and out of nowhere he yells, "He's not my son!" I took that to mean the kid was parroting something he'd overheard, probably his dad yelling at his mum, and I felt horrible. Then I told one of my friends this, and he said, "No, stupid, he's singing Billie Jean." And he was. Turns out he was tone-deaf and he loved shouting Michael Jackson songs. Okay, I know this may be cheating out of the subject matter a little bit, but come on, you can't blame the narrator for needing a break for some of the truly heartbreaking stuff. Okay, back into it, I guess. My husband's grandmother had just been placed in a nursing home around the time I'd first met her. One day we went with his parents to visit her. I was doing the awkward linger at the back, not knowing where to be or what to say, when the super old lady looks me dead in the eye and says, "I just want to go home." Her voice was tiny and her soul sounded so tired. I feel like part of me died that afternoon, because all I could offer her was a shock-induced, pursed lips smile. Those onions catch up with me every now and again. I was riding the commuter rail back home from work one night. It was pretty late, so the train was crowded and I could hear people speaking at the other end of the car. What looked to be a husband, wife, and 4 or 5 children, all younger than 12, were sat down with the dad talking to the fare collector. On this train, passengers have the option to pay in cash aboard the train. Well, it turns out this family didn't have enough cash to pay for all of the tickets. The father got into some sort of heated discussion with the fare collector, and the fare collector moved on to the next car. As soon as he left, the father starts ripping into one of his sons, who couldn't have been more than 10, for not making sure they had enough money for the tickets. Like he expected this kid to research ticket prices and make sure his parent had enough money. Truly ridiculous. I once saw a couple in their 40s or so walk out of a Kmart who were arguing about something. Both were loud, severely obese, smoking, and they appeared to have some mental disabilities. They sat down on a bench outside and continued to argue. After a few minutes, this old, crippled woman hobbled out of the store with a couple of grocery bags. She looked so weak, moving only a few inches with each step and barely able to lift her head. The couple got up, started walking with her, and it became clear that the couple were actually brother and sister, and the old lady was their mother. They kept arguing, saying things like, "I'm telling Ma, Ma, she hit me," just like children. The old woman didn't even have the energy to respond to them. I felt so bad for her. It looked like she'd been raising the same 6-year-olds for the past 40 years, never getting a break. Once on a camping trip, I saw a little boy running towards me. He yelled something like, "Help me! Somebody please help me!" He stopped when he saw me. His mother grabbed him shortly after that. When she dragged him away, he whispered something like, "Please don't hit me in my face this time." I told my mum, and she said it wasn't a big deal. I lost part of my childhood that day. I'm not really sure I can do this justice, but I'll try anyways. A female friend and I were waiting at this bus exchange a couple of summers ago, trying to get home from the beach. Basically, our route was sort of out of the way, so we were there for an hour waiting for it. We're sitting against this wall when this guy and this girl walk up to the stop, smiling and holding hands. Looking like the perfect high school couple. I remarked how nice that was to my friend, and she's like, Nah, that girl isn't happy. You can tell by her smile. Something's bugging her. And almost on cue, the girl looks down at her feet and says something really quiet, and the guy immediately zones out into traffic. Uh-oh. He mumbles something, and they had a good minute of silence. Then she looks at him, super sad, and they had a closure hug, expressing the harsh finality of it, I guess. Then as they separated, his hand slowly left her arm, and she got on the bus. He turned in our direction, walking down the street, head down, with one of the most pained looks I've ever seen in my life. Not like open grief that people who have someone in their life die have, but the guy looked numb, like an empty husk or something. Meanwhile, the girl turns back as she's boarding the bus with this expression of regret and sadness and continues staring at him as the bus drives past him. So after we watched this in silent awe, I turned to my friend and said, "Did we just watch a real-world movie breakup?" Like 5 minutes later, our bus gets there, and as we're driving down the road, we see the same kid again, wiping away his tears. This actually happened to me the summer before my senior year of high school. I had a tutor coming to my house for a 3-week period because I was taking some AP classes next year and wanted to make sure I wouldn't be lost in class. So it's the second to last day of my tutoring, and as we're on the deck at my house going through problems, I hear my parents arguing. They always had stupid arguments about nonsense, so I didn't think anything of it right away. A few minutes later, my mum storms out the back door in tears saying, "I can't do this anymore." My father, an alcoholic, walks out behind her, still carrying the argument, and just sounded like a jerk. They continue to yell and scream about whatever it was, and finally, my mum just leaves. This whole time, I'm just sitting there, 17 years old, on my way to play college football after my senior year, and I just watch my mum leave my dad, my 4 younger siblings, and myself right in front of my tutor. She was an older woman, and I could tell she felt absolutely horrible for my siblings and I. It wasn't exactly in public, but I was so embarrassed that she had been there to see all of this happen. In short, my parents split up while I had a tutor helping me at my house the summer prior to senior year. I haven't seen my mum since. Happy Mother's Day, I guess. I grew up in a western state where raising animals for 4-H is common. Obviously, you end up spending about a week at the state fair before you auction the animals off. My friends and I would get bored, and once we rigged up this giant fake spider that we won on the midway to drop from the rafters of the animal barn. We were probably about 13 or 14 years old. We dropped it in front of this rather macho-looking 30-something-year-old guy walking with his girlfriend, and the dude flipped. He screamed like a 13-year-old girl, knocked his hat and Oakleys off his head, and nearly crapped his pants. After he realized it was fake, the embarrassment set in like an out-of-control train. He started yelling at us and threatening to kill us. His girlfriend was laughing hysterically and complimenting us on our brilliant prank. He then started threatening her. Fortunately, there were plenty of people around, and soon enough, the fair security arrived and hauled him off. At first we felt bad, but then we realized this guy obviously had anger issues that the girlfriend was unaware of, otherwise I doubt she would have laughed. My guess is she would have been afraid, and we perhaps ended up saving her from years of bad treatment. To this day, I'm proud of my accomplishment. It was the best prank of my life. Did something that seemed like garbage turn out to be your best investment? I bought a 2001 Subaru Forester with 250,000 miles for $2,000, and that little box of crap has yet to ever let me down for the past 2 years. I just drove it back and forth from LA to Phoenix with no problems other than a small oil leak. I do all of my own maintenance on it, and I plan on replacing its engine in the next couple of months, due to the fact that a new EJ251 isn't too much money. I bought a jailbroken Fire Stick last year for $100. 12 months later, I've cut out my DirecTV and I strictly just use the Fire Stick. That thing has saved me close to $1,000 so far. When I was about 10 years old, my parents and I were in our backyard clearing out a ton of scrubs that had gotten out of hand. I had trouble focusing because our next-door neighbor had this really adorable puppy, and all I wanted to do was play with him. We found out that they were actually going to take him to an animal shelter because their son was not taking care of him like he had promised. I decided to ask my parents if maybe we could get him instead. I was an only child and never really had anyone to play with unless a friend would come over, and the thought of having a puppy to play with whenever I wanted to was great. My parents agreed, and our neighbors offered to sell him to us for $20. which is really cheap for a dog when you think about it. I had that saved up and immediately agreed and promised I'd care for him and love him forever. So he became my puppy, my brother, and after a few days of debating, I named him Snoopy. Snoopy became my closest friend. He made me laugh, played with me, and would just hang out and watch TV with me. He was always there for me, especially through some tough times in my life where I was extremely self-destructive. He saved me from myself. He was there at my side through tough breakups where all I ever wanted to do was lay in bed. He was an amazing friend. He was there to see me graduate 8th grade, high school, and college. I hoped he'd be there on the day I got married and maybe around for some time when I had kids, but unfortunately, as much as we wish for things, sometimes they just don't happen. He died 4 years ago after being by my side for almost 17 years. That little ball of fur we bought for $20 made such a huge impact on my life, bringing me years of happiness, friendship, and love. Definitely the best cheap purchase I've ever made. Damn it, this was meant to be a thread of miraculous purchases, not something that makes YouTube narrators cry. I guess this one is both. Rest in peace, Snoopy, you wonderful pooch. A cat toy that is literally just a feather on the end of a stick. It was only $1, but my cat gets hours of entertainment from it. Went camping and forgot knives for food prep. Went to local grocery store and bought a package of 3 cheap, no-name, plastic handle paring knives, different sizes. They were the best knives in the history of the planet. They're still my main knives years later. The best barbecue I've ever owned was a $20 Walmart grill that my dad bought for camping. Both him and I have searched for this particular type of barbecue since then and we just can't find it. Must have been a limited run with poor sales. It was a charcoal grill and the circular part that held the coals spun up and down along the central post. Most precise temperature control I've ever had while grilling. When my dad moved out following the divorce, he let me keep it. Then one of my college roommates threw it out because he didn't like it or something. Ugh. Okay, so keep in mind that cheap is a relative term. In the town where I live, there's a slightly sketchy area. It's not bad, but it's not nice either. There's a pub around the corner and all the buildings are dirty. There are some council flats nearby. And then there's my flat. An elderly lady had lived in it before and she had moved into a nursing home. The flat went up for sale. A few people came to the viewings, and of the people who did, nobody wanted to show it the TLC that it sorely needed. It was built in the 1970s and has been refurbished once in the early 90s. Done details are still original, like the fuse box which sometimes has fireworks inside of it. The floors were covered with an awful carpet the color of a rotting peach. The windows were dirty and covered with greasy blinds. It was a piece of work. I got it for cheap, way below my budget, and I spent several weeks doing it up on evenings and weekends. I ripped down grimy old wallpaper and tore up the carpet. I painted the walls and got rid of the blinds. I contracted someone to do the bathroom and floors for me. Now it's a mid-century modern flat type with a touch of Scandinavian minimalism. It was a sketchy, kinda cheap buy, but definitely my best one to date. In short, TLC turns sketchy to great. December 2012. Being out of Chicago, I bought a concert ticket through Craigslist out of Los Angeles for a one-night jazz concert hosted by none other than Tenacious D. After I paid through PayPal, the guy says he'd contact the venue to confirm the transfer. I bought my plane ticket and hotel room on good faith that this would work. I fly down the night before, go to Sunset Boulevard and get my room. The day of, I wait from 12 p.m. to 4 outside the venue by myself. I see at some point people loading equipment into the venue. I walk in through the side door, sit down at a random table for a bit, and end up talking with the production manager for the duo for a bit. I was told by him that hanging out was okay, but I'd be kicked out at 6 before rehearsal. 6 p.m. rolls around and I exit to get back in line. At this point, I'm now at the back of a 20-person line. An old lady proceeds to walk up to wait in line behind me. She's definitely not the age demographic for a Tenacious D concert. She proceeded to talk with me. "What time does the venue open? I'm supposed to be inside already." I tell her 8 p.m. Being that we're at a jazz club, I think maybe she's here for the wrong show. I ask her who she's here to see tonight. She says, "My son and daughter are playing here tonight." I respond, "Well, who's your son and daughter?" "Oh, my daughter," I can't remember her name, "and my son Jack." "Oh, right, let's get you inside." She holds my shoulder with one hand, cane in the other, and I bring her to the front door and knock real hard. The bouncer opens the door and I say, "I'm here with Jack's mom and I need to get her inside." "All right, second booth on the right." We walk in, I get halfway to her assigned seat, and an older gentleman meets me halfway and takes her the rest of the way to her seat. He comes back, thanks me, and talks with me for another 20 minutes while rehearsal's going on. Turns out it's Jack Black's stepdad. Rehearsal wraps up and he asks me if I want to meet his stepson. Heck yeah, I do. To wrap up the story, I get to meet Jables, Rage Cage, Cones, the electric guitarist, Spike, the bass, Brooks, the drummer. They all sign my vinyl collection, including OG, POD, ROTF, Jazz, and the Brutal Legend vinyl sleeve, and I got my pictures with all of my heroes. I then stand up in front row to the greatest jazz concert ever, sitting next to Billy Zane, the evil bald guy from the Titanic movie. To be honest, I don't even know if my Craigslist ticket purchase was legit or real, but I still got to see the show, meet my heroes face to face, and have this epic story to tell. Sometimes just walking into a place like you belong there can just work. In this case, under the guise of Jack Black's mom's caretaker. Not sure what you paid for the ticket, but it sounds like it was 1,000,000 times more than worth it in any case. $5 for a pack of 2 pairs of earbuds from Amazon. They were the best I've ever used. One lasted me a whole school year, the others I gave to a friend. I bought plane tickets from Pittsburgh to Dublin, Ireland from a sketchy site. It involved 3 layovers and 2 airlines. The company had 1 to 2 star reviews on every website I went to, and I didn't find a single positive review, but I bought the ticket anyway. After 20 hours, 4 flights, and a really sketchy layover in Portugal, I'd flown across the Atlantic with no problem for $200. A picture frame I got from the dollar store. People keep telling me how fancy it looks. I got my wedding dress for $250 offline. It's quality and fits like a glove. I financed a $400 mattress from a furniture store and it wasn't very comfortable, plus serious buyer's remorse. I returned it 30 days for a full refund and decided to take a chance on a $400 mattress from Amazon. One of the best purchases I've ever made. Super comfortable and far cheaper than the equivalent store mattresses. $70 ring from JCPenney's. Wife for 22 years and counting. That's $3.18 per year. Really good investment. Of course, she throws it at me from time to time, but a $70 ring doesn't do too much damage. Plus, she throws like a girl, so there's that. $1,300 for a salvage title. I found a 22-year-old Honda motorcycle. Owned it for 10 years and all I ever had to do was tires, brakes, oil changes, and scheduled maintenance. Never had an issue with that wonderful bike. Netflix stock quite a while ago when mailing DVDs was their main business model. In 2006, I purchased a home that was never gutted after Hurricane Katrina. Had lots of water in it for way too long and about 2 feet of muck, but the house only cost me $16,000. I put $50,000 in parts into it and did 90% of the work myself. After 12 months, I rented it for $1,800 a month. After a few years, I sold it for over $300,000. That was a lot of fun for 22-year-old me. A hamster. $30. I bought him on a whim when I was in a dark place and I fell in love instantly. It only took me a few hours and he was accepting food from my hand. By the 3rd day, he sat on my hand for the first time. When I entered the room, he'd wake up, wobble out of his hut, and hop up and down on the terrarium's glass front until I interacted with him. He loved my cats as well. When they sat around or on top of his terrarium, he'd hop up and down and stand against the glass to check them out. Whenever I changed his environment, he ran around and checked out every nook. He really loved toilet paper rolls and the flower pot that I'd fill with a soft plant that he'd nibble on. My dwarf hamster, Carl the Great, lived for 2.5 years and spread love wherever he hopped and wobbled. Any harbor freight tool. If used properly, at minimum you get your money's worth. At best, your $20 torque wrench has earned you a few $1,000s worth of work and saved repair bills by doing your own work. Big Bear Claw Back Scratcher. I bought a $6,300 tiny house trailer from a MAGA guy out of state who said he'd take guns or cash and had a bunch of barking dogs. A little fixing up and it's been the home for a homeless transgender youth for 4 months now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Birth control pills from an online international pharmacy. I know that there are some people on the internet that will make blissfully unaware recommendations, but there are many, many women who do not have easy access in the US. When I lived in South Carolina, Planned Parenthood was a 2-hour drive and county health services meant a 3-month wait for an appointment. If you could wait 3 months, the day of your appointment you'd still wait hours to see the doctor. The doctor would perform a brutal and cold, stabby pap smear. This would then be followed by bullying. He would not prescribe birth control pills, but would try to coerce women into Depo-Provera or Norplant. I'm so happy that I took a chance on the $3 a month pills that Indian pharmacy sent me. They worked just fine for the 15 years I lacked access. A cheap bargain bin dollar store Johnny. It didn't work, but now I have the most beautiful 3-year-old daughter because my protection failed. I don't know if this counts, as the product was expensive, but hey-ho, it's an interesting story. Me and my friend were chilling in a mall when one of those beauty salesmen approached us. His salesmanship was so relentless that me and my friend both ended up buying the bare minimum each so he could leave us alone. He kept lowering the price and we both ended up spending 48 Great British pounds, which is a lot of money for a skincare product. We still chalk it up to us being on green herb and not firm enough with our answer. Anyway, a month goes by and I remember the mistake and decide to Google the product. Turns out a lot of old rich people really liked its apparent anti-aging properties and was listed on eBay for around double the price at its cheapest. I quickly list it at the going price and it's bought for a whopping £115, including the postage. Funnily enough, my friend had decided to open his bottle the second we got back from the mall to make the most of his purchase. He flipped when I told him the going price, and even more so when I sold mine. I bought $20 army cargo pants from the military surplus store. The pros? Same material and double need as Carhartts that were twice the cost. Super rugged and don't care about stains. They're my work pants, plus they're camo. They're roomy, comfortable, designed to fit you even if they're not exactly your size. There's more storage space than your mum's Kia. They're made in the US, not by oppressive labor overseas. Plus, they support a locally owned shop. And the cons? Well, my wife won't be seen in public with me wearing them. Melamine sponges from China. I hated having to buy a small pack of Mr. Clean magic erasers so often, so I tried to find them in bulk. I call them Mr. Wee's magic erasers because it came from a Mr. Wee. Pair of $11 ankle boots from Walmart. They actually fit, which is amazing in itself because I have freaky feet that don't fit most women's shoes. They're so comfy, they looked cute with any and all pants and lasted for several years. I still miss those damn boots years later. I bought a random guy a beer at a dive bar. 7 years later and we're married with a kid. Pretty solid investment. Counterfeit Dr. Dre Beats pills for $5 in Cambodia. 25 years ago, I bought this cool, long-sleeved, tie-dye t-shirt at the thrift store for 25 cents. I still have it and finally just downgraded it to an around-the-house shirt because of the holes around its collar. I was lured into a ghetto housing area by the prospect of a $40 Surface Pro 2017. People approached me with weapons and I was like, oh god, I'm going to die. Then a man walked in between them and said, are you the buyer? I said yes and paid for the computer and he said, sorry, they thought you were here to harm me. I left and now I'm here. To be fair, a lot of us would go into highly suspect locales to get a Surface Pro for that much. I'm about to buy a new one for my remote recording jobs and the cost is making me very, very sad indeed. I honestly think I'd walk into an active war zone for a Surface Pro for $40. A body pillow. When I had major abdominal surgery, finding a sleeping position was hard. This really helped as it took the pressure off my front. Just a couple of weeks ago, I saw a flat-screen TV for $40 at a thrift shop. Or it might have been a computer monitor, I'm not sure. From corner to corner, it's about as long as my elbow to my fingertips. It had a PC input, all the video inputs, 2 HDMI inputs, some USB inputs, cable input, the whole works. So immediately I wasn't sure if it was too good to be true. It turned on and all of the buttons worked, but there was no remote. Also, I was told there were no returns, only exchanges. Well, I went ahead and bought it anyway, and it worked like a dream. I finally have something I can bring with me when I make my next move. I can change the volume and input with the side buttons, so that's basically all I need. One day I might get a universal remote so I can change the brightness, but I'm basically set. Probably about 15 years ago, I bought a Wichita State University t-shirt at a thrift store. No reason, no affiliation. Smash cut to now, I only ever wear a Wichita State t-shirt to bed. Never as an actual shirt, just to sleep in. 15 years and running. 75-cent rubber from the gas station. I bought a really cheap wallet phone case from Wish because I've had my wallet stolen twice. So I decided to fully embrace my grandmotherly qualities. I'm 21, and about 2 weeks into owning it, I noticed my phone in the actual case itself was starting to detach from the wallet part, and I was like, oh great, this is what I get for cheap. And it turns out it's meant to come apart. My phone case is a magnet. Now I just stick it to anything metal and take photos or watch TV. Sticking it to my washer to watch Netflix has been a game changer. I highly recommend getting a magnetic phone case. A tour guide approached us outside the Vatican offering the best discounted Vatican tours. This guy was the definition of sketchy. But we were like, oh, what the hell, when in Rome, pun intended. It was indeed a discounted tour and turned out to be a highlight of our trip to Rome. The tour guide was awesome and we skipped all of the lines to get right in. The substances from that festival I was at in 2015. 2 years ago, I bought a 1991 Ford F450 flatbed wrecker, commonly known as a rollback, for $4,000, from a group of crystal addicts in the deep south of Texas. The truck was easily worth $15,000. I was sincerely worried that on the way there I'd just end up getting mugged. Fortunately for me, everything turned up spades. There's no way in heck, as poor as I was back then, that I could ever hope to afford a new rollback wrecker. I now own a small auto transport business in Southern California, and I still drive that same old rollback wrecker to this day. I'm so glad that I gathered up my courage and did the deal because it truly catapulted my life into a new beginning. I was able to move out of my 30-foot travel trailer into a no bullcrap concrete foundation brick-and-mortar house. Thank you so much, little rollback, for being the most reliable and best money-making truck I've ever had. I spent $11 for a pair of 10-foot phone charger cords on Amazon. I figured as often as I had to replace them, $11 wasn't bad for two. 3 years later, and I'm still using the first one. My puppy. We bought him from some sketchy dude on the southwest side of San Antonio, and the little guy was in rough shape. But now he's almost 8 months old and a whopping 92 pounds of muscle and loose skin. The vet said we had a very nice horse. I searched around for a vasectomy reversal. Everything looked to be $15,000 to $20,000. Finally found a guy in Rhode Island for less than $3,000. This guy was alone in an office in a strip mall. He took cash only, which was very sketchy to me. I was afraid I'd come to in a bathtub full of ice. That didn't happen, but even after the procedure I was certain it didn't work and maybe the guy was a quack or a scam. This was over 3 years ago and my wife and I couldn't get pregnant for some reason. I figured I knew the reason. Well, I was wrong. Turns out it was her the whole time and my surgery worked perfectly. After a few visits to a fertility clinic, we're now 26 weeks pregnant, with a baby boy due in November. Definitely a sketchy cheap buy that ended up being one of my best purchases. My sister bought this sus eyelash curler kit. You put some chemicals on it like they do in the salons and it keeps your lashes curled for about 4 to 6 weeks. She got it for $10 on Amazon and the crap worked. If you go to a salon, they charge at least $50. Zenni is a glasses frame online shop and at first I was skeptical by how cheap it was, but my god are the frames durable. 100 out of 10 would recommend. I built my own mattress. I was online shopping and I stumbled upon several mattress-in-a-box companies such as Purple or Casper. I noticed that they constantly had diagrams on their websites that showcased the different layers of foam they use to construct their mattresses. I simply went to a foam wholesaler and in the dimensions of a queen mattress, I ordered different types of foam: standard, soft, memory, eggshell, in varying thicknesses. I stacked them all up on top of one another, and I've slept like a baby for the last 2 years. It cost me $300 as opposed to a similar mattress from an online site that would have cost hundreds more. 15 years ago, I was getting deployed for the first time. I wanted a backpack as a carry-on, but it had to be solid black. Went to a few places and ended up at Dick's Sporting Goods. I found exactly one bag that was solid black and it was perfect, but it didn't have a tag. Went to the register and the guy spent 10 minutes with 2 managers trying to figure out which bag it was so they could ring it up. They finally asked me, "Well, how much is it worth to you?" I replied that I needed it to deploy in the morning, so I'd pay whatever they wanted, and they charged me $10. It's a Kryptonics backpack that's no longer made now. I've taken it on 4 deployments, 3 TDYs, all over the country, and it made it through my BS and MS degrees. I'm now using it to pursue my PhD, and it's a bit ragged, but I love this darn bag. I've got this Kiwi brand knife, made in Thailand of course, for like $6. It was over 10 years ago when I lived in Melbourne, and that baby can still be sharpened into a razor. It's the best frickin' knife ever. You could cut silk with this thing. It's hacked through PVC, dismantled so many chickens, turned onions into confetti on the reg, and it still slices a tomato like it's a goddamn katana. What's the wildest level of passive aggression that you've ever seen? Me talking to a client. "Listen, I can do this for you, but you're behind on your invoices. You really need to get caught up." "Well, how much do I owe you?" "Well, including the last job, it's $1,500. "Okay, well, I'm confident we can get that to you by the end of the week." 3 weeks later, "Hi, just following up to see where we are on that payment." No response from the client. 2 weeks later, they write to me. "Hello, our site is down. Can you get it back up for us?" I'm confident I can get it back up by the end of the week. Long time ago in my first managerial position, I had a boss who got angry at me for somewhat ridiculous reasons. I was trying to plan out a potential project with one of my staff members, and my boss overheard us. He assumed we were going to skip other work to get this request done, when, in fact, avoiding that was exactly why I was having the meeting. At any rate, he came in and absolutely dressed me down in front of my project guy. After shift change, I went to his office and he told me he didn't want me to make any decisions without running them past him first. So, for the next week, literally every decision I made, I paged him first. Like, can Tom take his break half an hour early? Or, could Sally have extra supplies? 1 week later, he blew up at my co-supervisor at a staff meeting saying, "Seriously, you all need to be able to make some decisions yourselves." So, my passive-aggressive response worked just fine. I live in a house with thin walls and squeaky floors. My housemate, whose room is across from mine, has always been active at night. That's when he practices his singing, makes phone calls, and stomps around the house, slamming the doors behind him. It was a little annoying but harmless, until I started my surgery clerkship last year. This meant waking at 4 in the morning every Monday through Saturday. A few days before I was to begin, I spoke with my housemate and I gave him a heads up, asking very politely if he could keep it down after 9 p.m. In return, I would be as quiet as possible in the morning and move my morning routine, like shower, lunch prep, etc., to the evening. He agreed, but didn't actually change anything. 3 weeks into my first week of surgery, after one too many instances of our bathroom's door being slammed too hard late at night, I decided to move my shower to 3:30 a.m. and parked directly outside of his bedroom window. My car is old and the engine is loud. It took just over a week of being woken at 3:30, but now he's quiet by 8. That'll do it. Why should you show consideration to someone who's showing no consideration to you? In fairness to him, it seems like maybe he just didn't think about it that much until he had a picture of what it was like from your perspective. For a programming class, me and some friends created a tic-tac-toe bot that always ended games in a draw. It wasn't designed to win, only to end games in a draw. The best way to be passive-aggressive to a trophy store is to order a worst trophy shop trophy and then never pick it up. It was at work. I bake stuff and bring it in for my co-workers pretty frequently. One of our administrators brought in some brownies on a day that I'd bought in cookies. She took that personally and actually removed my cookies from the common area and hid them in her office so that only her brownies were available. So I went to her office, reclaimed my Tupperware, and told her that I'd keep the cookies in my office until her brownies were gone. On the way out of her office, the systems guy came by and was like, "Dude, where did the cookies go? We thought they were out. Can we have some?" Of course, I said yes and passed out cookies while half standing in our administrator's office while she stared daggers at me. Duolingo sent a notification to my phone once saying, "Well, it seems like our notification isn't doing anything, so we'll stop sending them." I used to do laundry at a funky laundromat in the UK. For some reason, they put a 15-inch shelf below the doors of the dryers for people to put their baskets on as they emptied the dryer. On a very busy day, one idiot decided to fold his clothes individually on this shelf instead of moving everything to a table and freeing up the dryer. To make things worse, he was minutely examining every item he pulled out of the dryer. A woman very nicely asked him if he wouldn't mind moving to a table so she could use the dryer. This elicited a very astounding display of profanity and rudeness that had me wondering if this guy had Tourette's or something. The lady realized she was dealing with an absolute jerk and backed off, rather disappointingly, I thought. She found another dryer and sat down again. A few minutes later, this idiot finishes his folding and is still blocking the dryer with all the folded stuff. He goes to get a rolling cart to take his stuff to the car. The lady sees her chance and grabs it, opens the dryer door, throws in all of his carefully folded stuff, and feeds the coin slot. The guy went ballistic when he came back, but somehow, nobody in the entire place had seen what happened. A couple of years, 2012 or something, I was in high school attending a computer science class. The exercises were so outdated that they stated we had to hand it in on a floppy disk. So I did. When I was still married, my ex's parents' Christmas gift to us one year was that they offered to pay for me to have a vasectomy. We hadn't discussed anything even broaching that subject with them. Personally, I asked my girlfriend at the time if she would mind if I hung out with my ex and some friends after school. You know, a simple no would have sufficed. Instead, she responded with, "I don't mind. I guess I'll hang out with my friend Eric. We usually get drunk and make out." My high school chemistry teacher hated my friends and me. We started it all by being high school idiots, but we were going to finish it as well. My friend would often crumple up his lab sheet and then flatten it out before handing it in. After doing this a couple of times, she said he'd get a 0 the next time he did it. So after we finished our next lab, he asked to go to the bathroom. He took his sheet to the library, crumpled it up, flattened it out, and then photocopies it. Comes back and turns in the very flat but crumpled-looking piece of paper. Had a former co-worker that when writing his child support payment check to his ex-wife, he would address the envelope to his wife with her first name, and then all 3 surnames of her various ex-husbands struck through before writing the surname of the current one. To note, the marriage didn't end well as he caught her cheating. Then she cheated on the next one, and the next one. I was working the morning at the counter and we just opened the shop. Not even around 20 minutes had passed by and this older lady comes up to the counter with her granddaughter and shows me her old battery in her hand with an annoyed look on her face like I'd peed in her cereal. It was her old battery that she was just handing to me. Not from the store, she gave me no conversation, just stared into my soul. It was very surreal. I stared at her for a couple of seconds and she sighs, pauses and then says, "Batteries." I stared at her and with the politest tone I could muster, I tell her they're just to the front of the counter, around 2 steps away, and she starts looking at USB sticks. I say in my most polite and pleasant voice with as much bubbliness as I could muster, "Oh no, not there, just to the left," and she spots them. I tell her she's got it and continue my business. She grabs the battery she needs, but then pauses and dramatically says, "You know what? I'm not going to buy these. I'll go to another store that will have decent customer service who'll help me." And she storms out while her grandchild is staring at her like a confused Bambi. I said, "Okay, goodbye," as soon as she said that and she stormed out with her very confused granddaughter. There are harsher demons to care about in retail beyond a passive-aggressive woman who expected me to mind read and didn't politely ask for my help. Besides, it was 20 minutes after we opened. I wasn't awake enough to care. When I did sushi samples, I wouldn't tell the customer to have a great day if they were rude, just a good one. Now listen here. I know that we came here to do a video on passive aggression, but this outright hostility is just taking things a bit too far. How can we live in a world of such rampant spite? I think I need to sit down. My wife and I have been planning on going on a weekend-long couples retreat for 3 months. We lined up the babysitters, her parents and mine, set aside the necessary funds, and waited in anticipation. The weekend finally comes, we drop off the kids at my folks' place because they're watching them for one night. They can't watch the kids for a second night because of a play my younger sister was involved in. There was also a storm happening at the same location our retreat was planned. My mother-in-law is a fearmonger and told us not to go because she feared for our safety. The place we were headed to got storms frequently, and occasionally there was a tree that fell over, but that's about it. Anyway, she really doesn't want us to go, but my wife and I need a break from the kids, so we say we're going anyways. She then calls my wife and spends a half hour on the phone crying to her. Literally crying about not going for fear of her child dying and leaving her grandchildren orphaned. Sunday evening, when we return, we find out that she had picked up the kids that day at noon, meaning she had left them at my parents' place the night before, so my mother wasn't able to go and watch her daughter perform in the play. We asked her why she backed out, and she said she was too stressed to deal with the children. She bailed on watching her grandkids for a night because we went on a trip that she thought was too dangerous, causing issues with my parents. I was riding on the bus at 7 a.m. after a 3 p.m. to 6 a.m. double shift. Needless to say, I was tired as all hell. Now, this specific route tends to be very crowded in the mornings, but my work was near the start of it, so I'd always get a seat and then proceed to fall asleep in it. So this group of middle-aged women got up at the next stop, and now the bus is full. So one of them stands next to me and says, "I guess there are no more gentlemen in this world." So I did what my half-asleep mind wanted and proceeded to say, "Oh, sorry, yes there are. I'm afraid seats are what we're short of." And I proceeded to fall back asleep. Yeah, that was an uncomfortable 45-minute ride home. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. So I feel really bad about this now, but I was at a subway, sandwiches, not the underground train, and there was a bus of Chinese tourists in front of me in line. They took a while to order because they spoke mostly broken English, but they got through it. Now I walk up and I hear the subway lady mutter under her breath, "Great, another fricking chink." I'm also Asian, by the way. Now I understand that dealing with a bunch of tourists who ordered in broken English is hard, but this really set me off. I proceeded to order being the most indecisive I can while using the most broken English I can, adding in random ching chong and ling long and every other ridiculous rhyming iteration that I can, and just proceed to waste her time. Now, when I finally get to the cashier, I have a sandwich which has been remade 3 times because the sandwich lady misunderstood me because of my bad English, and piled high with every single topping and sauce. I go up to pay and then say in perfect English, "You know, racism really makes me lose my appetite. Keep the sandwich." And then I walked out nonchalantly, treasuring the look of pure rage on the subway lady's face. My name is Anthony. For 25 years, I've had to do the annoying task of just dealing with people assuming they may call me Tony. First time, no big deal. Just a quick correction and we're on with our days. The only pass I give is really old people because maybe the name reminds them of a grandchild they lost to polio or whatever. I don't know people's lives and I'm not trying to make people cry on their final days. Anyways, I had a teacher in high school that would constantly call me Tony. Even after correcting her, and sometimes on that same day, I started to just flat out ignore her Tony calls. One time she kept saying it until the entire class turned around to look at me to see why I was silent. I did the ironic look back behind me to look at the wall. Last day of class, when she finally started to call me Anthony, I signed my final paper, Tony. Frick you, Miss D. Back during my degree, I was doing an essay about typographical trends. My lecturer and I had a disagreement about something to do with another project, something about a display or something, I don't quite recall. I handed him the essay on time, but with each word successively in Arial, Helvetica, and Gill Sans. Drove him nuts. When I was in high school, we had an oil painting unit in our art class. Oil paint is expensive, so we were given really small tubes and told to use only as much as we needed. Well, we were painting in a lot of fall kind of colors, things like squash, gourds, among others. Needless to say, there was a lot of yellow in these compositions, and most people used up their yellow tubes right away. There was this upperclassman girl in my class that was a total stuck-up snob, and took every chance she could to throw me under the bus for some reason. I think she thought I was a threat to her because we were both very artistically inclined, although the extent of her abilities was just copying paintings that she found online. Anyways, we all kept our paints in shoeboxes, and one day I went to class to find that my nearly full tube of yellow paint was gone. I look over and sure enough, the upperclassman snob has it. I was mad, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I went up to her and asked, "Hey, can I borrow some of your yellow?" She looks at me, gives me the snobbiest, most disgusted look I've ever seen in my life and says, "Only a little bit." That was the last straw. I took the tube and squeezed the entire thing onto my palette. It was oil paint, so I was able to keep it wet until I was done with it. A sign from a quality inn. Dear guests, due to the popularity of our guest room amenities, our housekeeping department now offers these items for sale. Alarm clocks, $25. Coffee maker, $50. Hairdryer, $45. With an ongoing list going all the way to towels, fridges, and bed sheets. Each guest room attendant is responsible for maintaining the guest room items. Should you decide to take these articles from your room instead of obtaining them from the executive housekeeper, we'll assume you approve a corresponding charge to your account. Thank you. Maybe a sad but necessary measure if your items are always being stolen. That's why the narrator only steals things from other people's rooms. The biggest one I've done? In high school, my English teacher hated Wikipedia with a passion, saying it's unreliable and anyone can edit it. So, for my research paper, I proved Wikipedia was a reliable source and not everyone can edit pages. She hated it so much and constantly asked me to write about something different. I had an English teacher I really disliked in high school. She was one of those grammar purists. I'm pretty sure if she knew that I used the singular word they, she'd yell. So she drank like 3 Pepsis a day and then one day decided to give up Pepsi to improve her health. So I came in with a bottle of Pepsi the next day and drank it nonchalantly during class. I don't even like Pepsi. At the mall, sitting in a chair waiting for someone, a woman with a cane walks up to the seating area and says to herself, "All the seats are taken, I'll just have to hope I don't fall down." Someone then offers her a seat, and 2 minutes later she says something about it being long enough and gets up and walks off again. Playing a martyr was apparently more important than sitting down. I used to shower at work. To cut down on hauling stuff back and forth, I bought a large shampoo container to work as well as a bar of soap. I placed the shampoo off in an unused corner out of the way of anyone else's stuff. A week later, the shampoo was almost completely gone, even though I'd only got to use it once. I left a note on the shampoo itself, "Don't use my shampoo, bring your own." A couple of days later, the shampoo was almost completely empty. So I tinkled in it. That's right, I went #1 in my shampoo bottle. I filled the bottle with my sweet wee-wee and then left it there. 2 days later, I found the bottle in one of the shower stalls. The top of it was off and it was lying on the shower floor on its side. I never knew who was using my shampoo, but I have a vision in my mind's eye of what happened when they used it the last time. When I was in college, I was in a group project called Capstone, where we built an entire enterprise network including host, branches, and servers, everything that we'd learned. Well, 2 people that I was supposed to be working with didn't do anything at all. I asked my instructor if I could be reassigned or work alone, to which he told me no. So I worked independently anyway. I made a network, but when it came time to present, I completely bombed it on purpose. I did no servers, I used basic DSL to the public internet for my only connection to the host, and used free DNS to do my DNS because I cheaped out on static IPs. I used static routing for everything. No switching, no port security, a complete bomb. My group project received a 15% on our capstone and caused my 2 group mates to fail out of the capstone project. That night, I emailed a PowerPoint presentation, project documentation and timeline, and 88-page technical document to my professor, as well as explaining the reason I did what I did. He told me that this would be unacceptable in the professional world and would get me fired, but he changed my individual grade to a 93%. Also, I work with one of the girls from my group now, and she's still answering end-user calls all day. I had a math teacher who I didn't like, so I did my homework in the top, tiny square of the paper where the lines met, showing my work and everything just ridiculously tiny. In a choir I directed, we welcomed a new tenor who had a great voice and added perfectly to the ensemble. The tenor next to him, however, was jealous of the new singer's ability and said, "If I had a voice like yours, I wouldn't think to subject others to it in a choir, but would sing solo instead." My brother annoyed me, so I took all of his nice pens out of his backpack and left just one crappy number 3 pencil. I mean, that's a heartbreaking thing to happen in school. I remember the constant, brutal fight to keep one's pencils unstolen and having to steal them myself when the unthinkable happened. You took your brother from wealth to stationary poverty, a child's world turned upside down. I have a child with my ex-girlfriend. Long story, but the short version is I haven't been allowed to see my daughter since she was 3 weeks old, but I pay child support every week. My ex's name is Brittany, and she gets offended when people spell her name Brittany because that's how that skank Britney Spears spells her name. Guess how her child support checks are filled out every single week for the last 13 years. My high school biology teacher would always give us homework sheets to fill in and hand back. I always folded it and put it back in my pocket, and she would always complain to me that my work was too creased. Being the lovely student that I was, I learned origami, and when I next handed in homework, it was in the shape of an X-Wing fighter. Freshman year of college, I had to take one of those Introduction to College courses, aka a waste of time I could be using to actually learn something. The professor was a Jewish lady and mocked our accents. Most of the campus was in-state students from Kentucky. She was a total witch. Towards the end of the semester, we had to write a paper on someone we looked up to for standing by their beliefs. Obligatory leader of the Third Reich paper. I hated that woman and she hated me. Received a 100% on it. I'm not sure which one was more passive-aggressive, my Nazi paper or the actual smiley she put on the paper itself. As someone who is British, this really shocked me. But once I saw a person tut and roll their eyes. Outrageous! Millennials, what do you want to get off your chest? I'm tired of having to be certified in everything to do something. People from the 80s just had to apply themselves. We have to apply ourselves and stand out in a sea of competition. Even some entry-level administrative positions require certification. Pretty soon I'll need a damn graduate degree to work the drive-thru window. You joke, but I've literally seen job postings for assistant managers at McDonald's that required a business degree. Some days I'm afraid I chose to study engineering more to make money rather than because it's something I'm passionate about, which could result in me having an unfulfilling career wishing I had chosen something else. About $30,000 worth of student loan debt. The new American dream is to find a job you somewhat like for the next 40+ years that pays decent, has benefits, and allows you to not be in debt. I'm tired of the millennials are entitled and need participation trophies bullcrap argument from baby boomers. You gave us trophies because you couldn't handle that little Jimmy wasn't a superstar and couldn't win anything for you to show off to your baby boomer friends. We all hated participation trophies anyway. I threw all of mine away. I'm Gen Z and I honestly don't like getting medals for being in first place when no one else in my gender and age group even showed up. I hated participation trophies as a kid. I felt like they were saying, well, you tried, better luck next time. Inheriting a house will probably be the only way that I'll be able to get out of a rental property. Then I'll wait to be screwed up by the property taxes here. We went through puberty during the advent of high-speed internet. I'm proud of how we handled that. You know, you're right. I'm damn proud of us for not just failing all of our classes and coming out of our rooms at the end of high school, all pale and with a massive right arm, after days of constant strain. Well done, fellow kids of the 2000s. Stop calling me a fricking millennial like it's a slur. You know what? I'm glad we're killing industries left and right. Most of them are based on bullcrap anyway. I'm not obligated to get ripped off at the mall, fulfill the expectation that I'll spend a ton on a diamond for my wife, or pay casual dining chains premium prices for crap food. Frick them, frick that, glad to be alive and watch them all burn. No, Dad, I won't get a full-time job in my field. Why? Because I've busted my butt to build a freelance portfolio strong enough that I make more money than I would full-time. Your life may be based around the almighty dollar, but mine isn't. I want a content life a heck of a lot more than any full-time job. I frickin' hate working. Why? Because I'm surrounded by fricksticks that think business today is run the same way as it was 50 to 70 years ago. I'd like to thank the people that managed to screw entire generations by adding sugar to everything, even frickin' water. I'm alienating everyone in my life because I work too long. My family thinks I couldn't be bothered to spend time with them, my friends think the same as well. But I need to be able to grind out to establish my career. However, working 14 to 15 hours a day for what equates to minimum wage is destroying my finances, stressing me the frick out, and every single day gets more depressing by the minute. I'm a commercial real estate analyst, working my way into consulting. Only now I'm really debating moving into management consulting, since there, although you work similar hours, you get paid better. The crushing weight of knowing my taxes are going to pay for an unprepared health system to deal with an aging population, the same population that's staying in the workforce longer, keeping us from getting jobs to pay those taxes. Also, it's not that hard to use an iPhone. If I can work it out, so can you. My cat has crystals forming in his bladder. It's infuriating because to hospitalize him will cost at least $1,000 that we just don't have, and vets don't make payment plans. Luckily, the vet took pity on me for literally crying in front of them and did a catheter to clear his urethra and gave me some meds for free. With a diet change, he's doing way better, but it's scary as frick and he isn't out of the woods yet. We need to stop producing plastic. I shouldn't have gone to college. I should have found a trade and stuck with it. I'd be in much better financial shape if I did. The only people I know who are my age and have decent jobs work in some kind of trades, normally CNC machining, and one works in a nut and bolt factory. I was fed the same BS as everyone else. You have to go to college. You don't want to end up as a plumber. I never connected the dots that one of my dad's best friends has made a living for 40 years as a plumber. Frick housing prices. That is all. I remember seeing someone on cable news network talking about how millennials aren't buying homes or new cars because they don't want to. Which, I would love a frickin' house and a new car. Give me more money or make those things cheaper and I'd be thrilled to buy. But I make crap money with student loans to pay off and I can barely afford my apartment. And I drive a piece of crap 2003 that I got for $2,000. To further elaborate, people really misinterpret what we do and don't want. I think most of us do want shiny new things like homes and new cars and to eat out at restaurants all the time and all of that, but we don't do it because it's just not worth it. Those things are very expensive and many of us aren't doing so well financially. It's not necessarily that we can't afford these things, in every case it's just that the benefits don't outweigh the costs. We can get by with less and still be happy. All of this bullcrap about millennials are killing whatever the topic of the day isn't correct. It's more that those things would kill us financially, mentally, whatever if we were to blindly partake. Things aren't like they were 40 years ago. People need to realize this. It doesn't help that the people who wring their hands about millennials not buying homes are often the exact same people who do everything they can to continually inflate housing prices. A basic house costs way more than it used to in inflation-adjusted dollars. It's not like building a small, affordable home is some sort of lost skill set. If I was to try and build a small starter home, some of the most intense resistance I'd run into would be from local regulations. There are minimum acreage requirements, minimum square footage requirements, all sorts of clutter codes about what you can and can't have in your yard, and that's just at the bare minimum. And were you to try and get rid of these regulations, you'd hear a grand opera of whining about how you were going to drag our sacred property values down. I have a business degree, my fiancé is a lawyer. My education is paid off and we're working on his. I've worked 2 jobs since I came home from college. We don't go on vacations, we cook at home, we cut corners everywhere we can. My ring was gifted to us by a godmother and we drive old cars. The issue is we're paid so little that we couldn't afford to live in a studio apartment and pay utilities, eat, pay car insurance, contribute to our 401ks, and save to eventually purchase a home. There'd be no safety net fund. We'd be scraping by, painfully, and only maybe making minimum payments on his loans. So I'm not sure why choosing to live with our parents while we climb out of student debt and save for a down payment is considered lazy or childish. We certainly don't want to live with them, but mathematically we don't have much of a choice. I'm curious to know what the older generations are getting out of writing these constant articles about what crap decisions we make and how lazy we are, why we won't leave our parents' homes, blah blah blah. I mean, there's a large collection of reasons they might feel resentment. We do have better stuff available than they did growing up, but also we have a lot of problems that they didn't have, many of which are directly attributable to them, and that some of them just haven't wrapped their heads around. So a few bad actors in the generation have decided that we just have things easier. Also, those of them who are retired have more time to complain. Okay, the narrator will stop now. This is about your complaints. I'm a millennial. I started washing dishes in a mom-and-pop restaurant when I was 13. That was 17 years ago, and I've held a steady job ever since. I moved out of my parents when I was 18 and have supported myself through that steady work alone. I don't own a home, or a new car, or 20 credit cards, and that seems to be an issue for a lot of people. For a very long time in the US, success was measured by things you had. That ideal is fading, and it's making a lot of people very nervous. Millennials aren't buying new cars or purchasing new homes at the rate of previous generations. We're a generation that values experiences over possessions, and that scares a lot of people. I feel that a lot of the hate that's thrown at millennials is due to this. We live in a country ruled and governed by capitalism. A detachment from material things weakens that rule because being able to keep people wanting things is what gives them power. We have it, you want it, keep working, and maybe you'll get it. It's an idea that powered our economy for a long time, and it's becoming antiquated. You know what I want to get off my chest? This shirt. But HR said I'd get in trouble if I did it again. I was born in 1985. I struggled with years of poverty before making full-time with the Postal Service and making decent money. I graduated college and it barely affected my prospects at all. My mother, when she was 19, got drunk and joined the army after dropping out of college. She had a house and vehicle paid off before I was born. Nobody over the age of 40 gets to say crap about responsibility to us. I hate how some people assume it's just so easy to get a great-paying job, especially when you're in college. I live in a relatively small college city, 40,000 people, and unless you're a professor, lecturer, or otherwise work for the university, your choices for work are essentially A. fast food, or B. retail. And even those jobs are getting hard to come by. But a lot of people, especially older generations, just think I'm lazy and don't want to work. No, actually, I'd love a 30 to 40 hour week job paying decent wage that doesn't exist here unless you're working for the school. And I love hearing this little gem too. Walk in, speak to the manager, shake his hand, and give him your resume in person. There's a very good reason that 99.9% of places do their hiring online. It saves time and money. The last time I tried doing what was mentioned here, the manager didn't even accept my resume and just said to apply online. I'm at the point where I'm donating plasma and selling my stuff just to buy food. I really do enjoy avocado toast. I really loathe the way the 50s has been entrenched as the best decade of America by all political groups. It was a flaming disaster of a decade. The bright lights you see from it today are the fires as Europe tried to stay warm during their rebuilding into a functional civilization. So of course the US has tried to keep that decade's policies alive. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I did a tour in Afghanistan from 2011 to 12, and it was brutal. I lost several friends to overly horrific events. I remember more than one occasion digging through the back of a wrecked truck trying to find the matching body parts of friends I knew so that we could send them home in one piece. I still remember what it was like to have to tap into my inner monster just to survive the ordeal. Now I'm out of the military and going back to college on the GI Bill at 30. I'm trying to reintegrate back into society, but I feel that due to my past experiences and things I've gone through, I'll never be able to relate to normal people again. You can't unsee what you've already seen, and you can't unsee the things you've done to other people in order to survive. I've lost the ability to empathize with the people having a bad day, and I don't know how to accept the help given to me. You know what? Baby boomers don't seem to give a single solitary frick about the well-being of others. They got theirs, they don't care if you get yours. No house, healthcare, or living wages? Sucks to be you. Pop retired at 60 and is still living in his $300,000 house that he bought for $80K, supported by Social Security, Medicare, and dividends from his company-sponsored retirement plan. And anyone who can't become successful nowadays obviously has too little work ethic and too much avocado toast. If a group of lazy, ignorant, and selfish kids can destroy your country, as I've heard it put so many times, then you built a pretty crappy country. The children now live in luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority, they show disrespect for elders, and love chatter in the place of exercise. Said by Socrates. This crap isn't new, bro. Unpopular optimism. When our cohort gets into the peak power ages of 50 through 70, we're going to know so much more than the previous generations did about each other and about the world. I think we'll be better stewards of society and the planet because of how easily and habitually we see the interconnections of people and nature. It won't be everybody, but there'll be more of us that understand what life is like for vastly different people than there ever has been before. I hope that this cultivates a sense of empathy and shared responsibility beyond what previous generations were capable of at those ages. The narrator likes this opinion. I'm a fan of pragmatic optimism and the fact that every generation is shaped by their experiences. We've had a lot of comments here about how tough a lot of our generation have it now. Let's hope we can apply that to making sure the next generation has it better. I don't want kids. Don't tell me it'll change or you'll want family when you get older. I don't want kids. That hasn't changed for years. I had an older coworker that kept saying that people my age don't want a house, kids, marriage, and just want to live with their parents and travel and buy stuff. I always felt like crying whenever she said that because I feel like I'll never be able to afford a house or kids. All I've ever wanted to do was raise a family in my own home. I'm just about to turn 32 and I've moved in with my significant other and his mum so that I can have a chance to make significant savings. I haven't been able to keep a job in almost 3 years due to layoffs, affecting each company I've started at. Always being the newest hire, I'm out the door first. Now I'm currently temping and hoping I can land something permanent. It's hard to feel hopeful lately. As a minority, I don't understand why the extreme left wants me to hate all white people and vilify them. I judge people by their character, not their skin tone. I don't generalize a group, and I treat people like individuals. That being said, I'm not delusional enough to think that we'll all be smoking a doobie around a campfire singing Kumbaya. Nonetheless, I'd like a sense of equity among people and not a concentration of power within a group. Let's end racism, sexism, and homophobia. It's obnoxious to always be grouped in with the stereotype of millennials, constantly judged by older people who see themselves as better just because they were born at a different time. Having said that, the few people who actually match the millennial stereotype really suck. I'm so tired of baby boomers or Gen X people getting on my case as to why I don't have kids or why I'm not married. 1. I don't need a child to give meaning to my life. My job gives me meaning in my life, Linda. 2. I wouldn't want to settle for less than what I deserve and end up in a crap marriage with someone who treats me like garbage, Linda, you fricking idiot. Right now, I want to get my bra off because it's pinching me. Dear older generations, you can't accuse millennials of killing industries when you guys caused the economic crashes that murdered businesses left, right, and center. Also, stop accusing us of entitlement and selfishness for wanting a well-paid job with reasonable hours that let us afford our own flats and houses. I remember using a phone that was attached to a wall. I remember using floppy disks. I remember playing outside with my friends. I remember not being glued to a device 24/7. I'm 27. It's annoying when people think that we didn't know what life was like before technology became popular. It makes me sad that we're the generation that knows climate change is happening and still just want to keep consuming like all the past generations. Our grandparents really had no idea. Our parents were starting to see, but now it's a blatant, undeniable fact, yet most of us still go out and buy the latest consumer-trending bullcrap like it was candy. Frick college debt. Frick that crap. Millennials are killing off this or that. Frick you rich old jerks. How about you all make some paying jobs, damn it? Sorry, we shipped that job overseas. So many things. First off, I hate being clumped into the stereotypical depiction of a millennial. I hate people assuming I'm a princess who doesn't know how to do anything herself. Sure, there are a ton of things I don't know how to do, which I ask for help with so I can learn how to do them myself. But suddenly, me not knowing how to do certain things turns me into a spoiled princess because I ask my father to help me? It's not like I'm asking him how I fold my fricking clothes. I'm asking for help managing my fricking student loans and how to properly use a credit card. Second off, I'm sorry I fricking care about the environment. The UK needs a savage cold snap to correct the attitudes of the elderly. Oh, who am I kidding? It won't work though. The winter fuel allowance will save them, even the rich ones. Back off, Dad. Nothing gets between me and my fidget spinner and Jimmy Neutron. If there's still genuinely someone the narrator's age watching Jimmy Neutron and using a fidget spinner, you're hilarious and thank you for putting down the toy to type your comment. Yes, I know your generation, baby boomers and older, used to be able to go wherever and stay out late and play in the streets, but it's no longer safe for the new generations to do, and it's because of the crap you guys did. Thanks, Susan, for raising crappy kids who don't take responsibility for their actions. Also, if you're going to spend a good 20+ minutes talking about how kids nowadays are too attached to their tablets and smartphones, don't ask me to fix your stuff when it stops working. Read a book, go outside, take a long walk off a short pier. I'm seriously considering what an economical or ecological collapse looks like for my children. I don't even know where to start. Was basically forced into college as the first in my family to do so, ended up having no idea what I really wanted to do, like most young people, so I spent 6 years getting a bachelor's and master's degree in a subject that has very crappy prospects for a well-paying career. Now I have over 80k in debt with no career prospects. Top that off with depression, anxiety, and the general pains of love and life, and I have thoughts of self-deletion daily. Older generations call us lazy and entitled, but I, and a majority of my friends, are doing the following. 1. Working for a 4-year degree that will never be good enough, so we have to plan for a master's program, thus throwing us another 60k into debt that we can't afford, but we can't find any jobs to even put a dent in the debt because any job that will help us is looking for master's degrees or 5 years of experience. And 2. Working full-time on top of being a full-time college student at minimum wage jobs so we can afford to survive. My separated parents' families are in no positions to help me out financially, so I'm on my own. We're all frickin' burnt out because of the stress of having to go to school and work a full-time job that's killing us. That's 8 hours of work, 6 hours of school and 2 hours of homework, and 8 hours of maybe sleep, leading to clinical depression and anxiety, which just piles up. Everybody's talking about war, the conflict in other countries, and political drama. I honestly have no idea what the frick is going on. If someone could sum it all up, that'd be pretty nice. I'm sick of going to stores and seeing a single cashier working at the registers, or going to a restaurant and seeing a single gosh darn server working all 40 tables. I'm sick of getting crap service, and I'm sick of thinking about the poor people who are getting worked to death just because companies have discovered it's okay to overwork one person and pay them a crappy wage, instead of hiring 2 people to work normally and pay them respectable wages. I can't imagine how selfish the people at these companies would have to be to promote such awful treatment of staff simply to satisfy their shareholders. It's all about money, money, money. For frick's sake. I hope that there's a huge reckoning for all of these butthole corporations one day. I have my popcorn ready. Don't worry, fellow millennials, when the previous generations die, we'll get to rewrite the history books, and I'm certain we'll uncover some unsavory treatment that will make the current lambasting of our generation seem quaint. I'm not going to necessarily follow the traditional American dream path like my parents, i.e. getting married, buying a house, staying at the same job for life, having a bunch of kids and buying a new car. Older people look at me like I'm crazy because my husband and I would rather rent and go on vacations than buy a house, settle down and have kids. Those things might come eventually, but for now I'm happy doing my own thing. What is the most pain you have ever experienced? A cluster headache. It's sort of like a big migraine made of lots of other big migraines working together as an elite unit to infiltrate every pain receptor you have. You've got that right. I had migraines since I was very young, but I got my first cluster headache when I was 17. I thought that it was just a terrible migraine at first. I took my meds and tried to sleep it off. But my mum came to check on me, and when she tried to sit me up in bed because I wasn't responsive, she said my eyes rolled back in my head. I literally fainted from the pain. She rushed me to the ER, and they immediately sent me in for a CAT scan because they thought I could have a brain aneurysm or maybe a tumor. Nope, just a cluster headache. They put me on a whole bunch of substances, and I ended up sleeping for about 20 hours. I'm glad they did because I wanted to die. The pain was so bad. I've had a few cluster headaches since then, but nothing in my life has ever come close to the agony from that first one. You never forget your first time. A warning that this is fairly graphic. The first number 2 after I gave birth to my child. I had stitches and, very unfortunately, hemorrhoids from pushing out my child. They also put you on iron, which makes your turds literally hard like bricks. It was like being ripped apart and giving birth all over again. I was sweating, praying, and almost on the verge of tears. Well, mine was a skinned knee, by which I mean all of the skin, and an infection. Infection under the kneecap, skin healed through the bandage, then they ripped the bandage off. Oh. I didn't find out that I was allergic to common dental anesthetics until I was 16. I just assumed that when they injected it and my face felt like it was on fire, that it was a way to distract me from the pain of having fillings and extractions done. It wasn't until I started discussing my anxiety with a new dentist that I actually found out you're supposed to feel numb, puffy, and free of major pain. You see, I've heard of people who go their entire lives not realizing they're allergic to this or that food and just thinking that things like peanuts are spicy and make you ill if you eat too much of them. But never have I heard of a similar phenomenon with painkillers being injected by medical personnel who are most likely better trained than anyone else to be able to recognize your abnormal reactions. I'm glad you eventually got someone who realized. I've been pretty lucky as far as physical pain goes. I once got an infection in my gums that made it painful to breathe, let alone speaking and eating, but that's been the worst. However, the time leading up to my divorce was traumatic. There's a psychosomatic sensation that comes along with it that starts in your sternum and radiates out to your fingertips. It makes the hair on your skin stand on end, and it feels like the bones in your arms are being split apart. It's impossible to think about anything other than your life falling apart, and all you want to do is curl up into a ball. I experienced this every day for months as I was driving home from work. Every day I'd get in my car and have an ugly, ugly cry, and feel like an alien chestburster was going to come out of me at any moment. I never want to feel like that again. I'm terrified of ever feeling like that again. When I got bitten by a rabid dog, went straight to the hospital. What they have to do is scrub the crap out of any wounds and then inject into them. Every little scratch. My hand was torn to crap and covered in bite marks. They injected so much liquid into my hand and fingers that they swelled up to about 3 times the size. Kidney stone. I had no idea what was happening, but it was clearly very, very wrong. The doctor sent me for prescription-only painkillers, and I had to lie on a bench outside the chemist, waiting for them to kick in before I could move enough to go to the hospital for an X-ray. Welding out on site, and it started to rain really heavy. Next thing you know, the arc from the welder decides to earth through your body and electrocutes you and blasts you off your feet. It feels like you've been kicked very hard in the head and your joints feel like they're on fire. A cyst ripped my left fallopian tube and left ovary off my uterus. 9 hours of ineffective morphine drip in the ER and then 4 hours of surgery later, laparoscopy and C-section, they'd removed a 6.3-inch cyst that surrounded and destroyed my ovary. In short, lost an ovary, half as likely to get pregnanans. Score! Gallstones. Imagine a fiery hand reaching into your insides and squeezing as hard as it could. Gout. Fricking crucial pain in the big toe joint to the extent that even looking at it hurts like a witch. Lying in bed and the sheet grazes it? Through the roof! Have you ever slipped on a wet tile and landed so hard that your coccyx, which is meant to curve inwards, actually bent out? I have. My vision went cloudy, I felt a flush of cold and could barely stand. For an 11-year-old, that's some serious crap. Trigeminal neuralgia. I've had it for 2 years now, and you never get used to that pain. There's a reason it was known as the self-deletion disease for a while. Dental abscess. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Look after your teeth, viewers. Now, hear me out, but period pains. And seriously talking, I don't or barely have them, but there was one time. One morning I was preparing to go to college to do an exam when I felt it, like someone punched and stabbed me in the stomach repeatedly, with the stabs being slow as F. My legs couldn't carry me anymore, so I collapsed on the floor, dragged myself to the couch and sat there, rocking back and forth while trying to give my stomach a massage. It lasted like 15 minutes, but holy frickin' crap, I got up from there shaking and terrified. I felt other types of pain before and after, but that one just got stuck in my brain. The worst part is I know some women actually have these every month. I wouldn't be able to have them. Like I would legit want you to take my insides out as long as I won't have them ever again. A month ago I had the flu, a sinus infection, and then a nasty cold. Then I had to fly as soon as I felt better. Getting up to altitude, my ears started hurting, like a whole ton. I was almost ready to scream and beg them to turn the plane around. Then they popped and I was fine. Then it happened the next day on the next flight as well. It was horrible. Tooth pain, and to qualify my comments, I was once in a car accident and broke every bone below my waist and both arms. The tooth pain hurt more. Seriously, if there's something wrong with your teeth, get it fixed before it starts hurting. Not so much physical pain, but my best friend, the only person I've ever been so close to, was hit and had their life taken by a drunk driver going the wrong way on the freeway. Don't drink and drive, people. I had the right half of my skull removed and stored in a freezer for a few months after I was hit by a drunk driver. If I ever bent forward too far, I'd experience the most painful headache. They'd last hours. I can't remember the substance I was prescribed, it was bitropital or something. It was my savior. The medicine would knock me out. I vividly remember collapsing in bed and praying for the meds to bring unconsciousness. Nothing has ever come close to matching those headaches, and I doubt anything ever will. I never had them again after they nailed my skull back into place. I guess I'm lucky. I hear some people continue to get pain for a while after. Compartment syndrome is pretty high on the list as well. One time, I was like 7, I was calling my dog to come inside because we had to go pick up my older brother from soccer practice. I got a treat and started calling her name. After calling her name a few times, I turned in the other direction, and there she was, running and jumping up on me. Her front paws hit my shoulders and I fell backwards onto the cement. The back of my head smacked the ground so hard all I could do was scream. My mum ran out to me and brought me inside and put a pack of ice where I fell. After that, I figured that I had a concussion and a skull fracture, which would explain the massive headache I had the week after the initial impact. It's been 10 years and the pain of that impact has never been beaten by any other pain I've endured. In short, a dog jumped on me, I fell backwards onto cement, got a concussion and fractured my skull. Lots o' pain. Wait, why did your mum put a pack of ice on the ground where you fell? I'm kidding, but the way you wrote that did give me a few seconds pause. I hope there was at least one doctor's visit after this event, but then again, maybe your mum just took a patch of concrete to the doctor as well. Ingrown toenails. After college, I got a gig as a projectionist. Lots of bending and squatting, which I wasn't used to, but acclimated quickly. Except for my big toe. It decided to ingrow. I suppose from all the weird, new sustained stresses it was under. Maybe shoe choice didn't help? Regardless, it sucked. There was actually a slow churn of pus that would work its way out between the nail and flesh it was slowly stabbing into. I went to the doctor and he literally described the procedure to correct as torture. Plus, my insurance was, at the time, a little flaccid. Hanging out with the significant other one night and she asks me to get something off the side of the bed. I reach over, come around, and her foot is also coming around and her foot beautifully connects with the toe. And my vision explodes. It was like a momentary, all-encompassing starburst of light. I think I passed out for a split second, but I'm back in time to see a glob of pus sailing through the air and onto parts unknown. She doesn't even react or isn't even looking at me. It's fine. Most painfully single moment of my life, no big. But she did something. Magical, healing 5 key points kick. It was like the toe was convinced that it needed to get its crap together, and it did. Slow recovery eventually became full recovery. No doctor torture required. I married that girl. The toe thing was admittedly unrelated in that particular decision, but it seemed like an appropriate end to the story. Shingles in my face. I'd rather give birth 3 times over than to experience that nerve pain ever again. Tooth pain because of pressure changes during a transatlantic flight. I thought my teeth would implode. Inner bleeding in my calf. I don't know what it was. I injured myself during MMA training, I guess, but I was fine for several hours and had no pain. Then I noticed after several more hours that I can't really set one of my feet on the ground without pain. I didn't think too much about it. I thought some insect might have bit me or something, and I went to bed. I couldn't sleep since I was in too much pain, but I thought I would fall asleep at some point and it might be gone the next day. Then at some point I felt like rather dropping dead than enduring this pain and decided to go to the hospital. I couldn't place my foot on the ground and was jumping on the healthy foot to move forward. I was surprised how much harder that was than when you try it with 2 healthy feet. When I got to the emergency room, there was no one else and I waited for another hour until it was my turn. It was close to the point where they would have had to cut my calf open to release the blood. Honestly, the most physical pain that I've had to endure so far. My eardrum burst because of an ear infection. Hours of writhing and then sweet relief. The sweet relief came with a lifetime of hearing loss though, so I wouldn't recommend it. Might be a little bit cliche, but a kick in the nads hurt like a motherfricker. To the point where you can't move and start sobbing like a baby. Getting kicked in the nads isn't sore instantly. It's about a minute after getting kicked in them that's sore as hell. Makes you want to throw up in pain. Just reading this and I feel pain in mine. I remember one time when my friend chest passed a basketball at point blank into my gonads. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Circumcision as an adult. Hands down the worst pain I've ever encountered. I've had my face broken in 3 places and had surgery, and that wasn't even close to the pain of about 20 stitches in my danger zone. Indeed, I've had it done too. 3 days later, I woke up with a huge morning surprise. 2 stitches ended up popping off. That wasn't too pleasant. And yes, huge may be an exaggeration. Waking up during surgery to repair a shattered shoulder. I woke up to a guy putting a screw in my bones. Mother fricker, stop that! Oh, I thought you were out. I'm not, you fricking son of a witch! Stop that! I proceeded to use up every curse word I knew in about 5 languages. And then I was out. A couple of weeks later, I was in for a follow-up, and I looked the guy up and apologized for the nasty stuff I said. He laughed and said it was okay, and then he said, "So, you said something I think in Russian, what does it mean?" I told him that he really didn't want to know. Easy answer. Childbirth by a mile. I've broken many bones, undergone many surgeries, and suffered many kinds of injuries, but childbirth takes the trophy as the most painful of all of them. The only way I can describe it is, imagine having your hips cranked apart slowly with a vice, and no break from the pain once the contractions are coming sharp and fast. After 16 hours of trying to be a hard woman, I opted for epidural, so I can only imagine what extra pain the pushing and crowning would have added. Anyone who says it's not that bad is bullcrapping you. Sciatica. I was pushing cars, stuck in a blizzard one day, and during a push, I felt something go in my back. Kept going and helped because how could I not when someone in front of me is stuck? So by the end of the day, I was hurt. 2 days later, I was in pain and drove myself to the non-emergency at the hospital at 3 a.m. while crying because I couldn't stop the pain shooting down my lower back and leg. It felt like someone had kicked me as hard as they could in my thigh and calf. Except the pain didn't lessen, it just stayed. If I moved or stretched, it was like being stabbed in the nerves. I ended up slipping a disc which pinched the nerves going down my leg. Sciatica sucks. I was run over by a car as a pedestrian. That day, I thought I was totally fine. I was taken to the ER and the extent of the damage was a minor concussion. I woke up the next morning and holy frick, I felt like I'd been run over by a car. The narrator was hit by a car once and also felt completely fine, only to realize that he had grazes all over the place some minutes later. Maybe it was shock for me and more likely concussion for you. Nothing beats trigeminal neuralgia. Sorry, I've got my sympathy for sufferers of other conditions, but there simply aren't words to describe how much pain this illness causes. I'm an 8-year sufferer, which is nice, since a lot of people just think screw it and decide not to be alive anymore after a while. And the number of people who know what it is negligible. I had 2 perfectly normal teeth extracted and a 3-hour root canal surgery on another before the doctors came even close to working out where the pain was coming from. This is gonna sound cheesy as heck, but screw it. Heartbreak. The pain is nauseating. No, I've heard about that too. I remember my friend telling me about how one of his best friends had been dumped after a 5-year relationship and couldn't breathe and her chest hurt really badly. Kidney stone. I'd taken the day off because I thought I had back pain, and by the evening I was curled up in a ball on the bathroom floor, howling. Just howling like an animal. I had to have my middle fingernail removed on my right hand. Somehow it got infected and swelled up massively, and there was a huge amount of pus underneath the nail itself. The doctor injected local anesthetic in 2 spots just above where the nail starts, but I could still feel the scalpel, so I was given 2 more injections, but could still feel everything. It turns out local anesthetic doesn't work on me. The painful bit was when the doctor had a pair of pliers in one hand, tugging and twisting the end of my nail, and the other hand held a scalpel that was slicing the skin between my finger and the underside of my nail, slicing all the way under the nail to the end of it. Oof. My first baby was 36 hours of labor with an epidural at hour 28, with the contractions less than 3 minutes apart the whole time. It got to the point where I was having double contractions, where a second contraction would start just as the first ended. I was in so much pain I blew chunks, passed out numerous times only to be brought back by another contraction, and was hallucinating. The second baby was a planned C-section. I got a minivan's sliding door shut on my finger, shattered the distal and intermediate phalange of my right index finger, got 26 stitches, lost my fingernail, it grew back, and suffered permanent nerve damage. It's numb most of the time now, so definitely not as bad as most, but it did still hurt like a motherfricker. First waking up after my scoliosis surgery. That sucked. Ahoy, fellow crooked friend. I had 10 vertebrae fused 8 years ago myself. To be honest, the pain from surgery itself wasn't so bad, but waking up with a breathing tube down your throat, feeling like you're choking, but they can't take the tube out until you breathe on your own. That was the worst of it for me. The surgery has made life 50 times better for me though. Mild and moderate pain nearly constantly, but no worse than it was before surgery, and now no back brace. I'm glad to hear that you're all shipshape now. Well, once I had a dry socket. That hurt quite a bit. Pain radiating through my jaw and into my skull. I'd set that at a 3. Sometimes I get these horrible calf cramps. The upper part of the calf muscle, where most of its bulk is at, will start to slowly feel like it's forming some kind of fist in there. The anticipation is awful. Sometimes I can stave it off by either stretching the muscle or suddenly sinking my fingers deep into it, but that usually just delays matters. And then I'm stuck, curled up, trying to do anything to avoid flexing or moving that muscle. Just waiting it out, gritting my teeth, tears at the edge of my eyes, hoping the pain will go away soon. That's a 5, maybe a 6. My lower back aches most of the time. It's a lower level pain, a 1 on the scale just to indicate that I know that yes, it's definitely pain. My existence is this, hovering at a 1, sometimes drifting up to a 2. I can still feel the fibers on either side of my lower spinal column even now, but sometimes with no trigger or warning other than movement, it seems like every muscle in my lower back decides it's time to pull and pull for all they're worth. I don't think that's actually what's happening, but it's hard to tell because what I get is a brief moment of noticing my spine muscles feel tighter than usual. Only just a moment, though. And after that, my existence is pain. I don't cry and I don't even cry out. That would require too much mental bandwidth. That would require me to still be in control. I'm really not, though. Animal instinct has taken over, and it has one goal, and that goal is to escape the pain. I gasp like a fish. I'm aware, but all I can do is try and bounce myself to a position where the pain is less, to try and find a position in which I'll be allowed to talk. If there's anybody nearby, I try to let them know that I'm probably physically fine and to let it pass. I say this now because the doctors can never find anything wrong with me, and they've looked. What used to be a trip to the ER is now just me trying to wait it out and maybe, if I can, take a mega dose of an anti-inflammatory. Ibuprofen is my go-to, because frankly that's all the hospital will do for me. I stay in this state for maybe about an hour. I think the most time I've ever been in this state is 3. Then it fades and my lower spine floats at a 3 to 4 for a week or 4, and then it's back to its usual 1 or 2 on the pain scale. But that initial pain? That's what I'd call a 10. Since I was 10 years old, I've been getting this upper abdominal pain. Attacks usually last more than 5 days, nothing takes the pain away, not even a little bit. I've been to countless doctors, emergency trips, and countless tests, but still cannot be diagnosed with anything. I've been given prescription painkillers that don't take the pain away, even. It's by far the worst pain. It gets so bad I end up curled up in a ball crying, and considering seriously jabbing sharp objects right into where the pain is located. I get so sleep-deprived. I've given birth twice, once without an epidural. This abdominal pain I get is way worse. Birth really wasn't that painful for me in comparison, just like really bad period cramps. The second worst pain I felt would be symphysis pubis dysfunction during my second pregnancy. I'd literally be paralyzed with pain if I dared lie down. I saw a chiropractor who worked absolute magic, and the pain was gone with regular pelvic adjustments until I gave birth. In 10th grade, I went to the eye doctor because I was having allergy problems in my eyes. I have good vision, so I've never really been to an eye doctor before, nor had my eyes dilated. He dilated them for one last check for symptoms. Turns out I was allergic to the eye drops. When I stood up to walk out to the lobby, I passed out and fell flat on my face/chin on the thin doctor's office carpet. I'm 6'3". It completely shattered my jaw, knocked my front tooth out, and bit off the top of my tongue. Ambulance, multiple doctors, hundreds of stitches, horrible concussions, so I don't remember any of it. It happened in the beginning of May, and I couldn't chew anything until July. It hurt. In short, shattered my jaw and bit the tip off my tongue at the eye doctor. What never going to happen to me event happened to you. I won a raffle in 4th grade. The prize was a duffel bag. I was so happy. I just won a motorcycle at work about a week ago. I've got 2. The first was my father having an affair. The second was driving 8 hours for a job interview, only to realize that I had PM and AM mixed up, so I missed the interview by 12 hours. I cried the whole way back home. Getting my house raided by the police. Was living with a roommate at the time, and he was a bit of a green herb user, but not a dealer. We think that he bought something from someone who was being watched, and the cops thought that my flatmate was in distribution. I got shot. I definitely didn't see that one coming. I was walking in downtown Montreal a few weeks back, and someone came up to me on the street and asked if I wanted to buy any substances. As a kid growing up, I was led to believe this would happen all the time, but this was the first time. This happened to me in downtown Red Deer. I told the guy no, I don't do that. In reality, I was just highly suspicious of this guy. I wonder if he was a narc or wanting to steal money. I mean, who the heck sells or buys from a random person in the street these days? What a minefield to navigate for both parties. Remember, just say no, unless there's a bunch of cool kids doing it. When I was 18, I was offered 10 grand to marry a girl from Sweden. I'm American, and she wanted to stay in the US. I didn't go through with it. As someone who's lived in both countries, I've got to say that she was either an Americanophile or, more likely, not actually from Sweden. It may be cold there, but the standard of living is through the roof compared to most places, especially the States. Sorry, Americans. Being in a long-distance relationship. I always thought people who did it were insane or even desperate. Turns out you can have every option in the world and still only want the one person who lives far away from you. Fathering a disabled child. As devastating as it is to find out your kid is disabled, it's crazy how it stops being about how it would impact your life and it shifts entirely to how it will impact their future. At least, that's how it was for me. Becoming a widow at 25. 3 years this late October. I miss her every day. She got sick and led up to having heart failure. She got a ride home from work. I had to drop off a coworker whose car had broken down. I would have been the one to pick her up. Someone didn't see her until too much time had passed. Realizing that someone I love was part of one of America's many weapon-related tragedies. I watched the news for a few hours, saw that there was a siege situation in the mall. Hey, isn't that where my sister's name works? Is she working today? 3 people dead, 1 expected to be the perpetrator. Oh, well, there's hundreds of people in the mall at any time. I just wonder why she hasn't called us yet. The event took place around a food court. She works near the food. Could have been anyone, though. Who knows? Here's a picture of the bullet-riddled walls and witness reports. Wow, this is on every news station. It's been a few hours. Where is she? It took place on the upper-level food court. Oh crap. The only stores up there are hers and some kids' shops. No one with a sane mind would open fire at them, but he wasn't sane, obviously. You're awful. You're just wishing that little kids were dead instead of your sister. Every person would, wouldn't they? It took place in… They named the store she worked at. It's a populous store. There could be lots of people there. 1 female, 2 male, one of which is the expected perpetrator. She works in there. She's a female. Female, early 20s, white, expected to work at the store. That's her exact description. But lots of girls look like that who work there. And then the phone rang. Went to my first club, 16 to 21-year-olds allowed, on senior week about 2 weeks after turning 18. Met a girl who actually seemed into me. We left and ended up doing the deed on the beach. Turns out she was 14 and lied to me when I asked her earlier, even showing me a fake ID. But that didn't matter to the cops, of course. Another of America's tragedies at my high school. It's pretty messed up to think about how one person who hardly anybody knew could affect so many people's lives so unexpectedly. Falling in love. My parents can't really stand each other, so I just assumed I'd end up the same way. A while back, I dated a guy for nearly a year before finding out he was actually living with his real girlfriend of about 8 years. As soon as I found out, I introduced myself and told her, crying, and she just shrugged her shoulders and rolled her eyes. Didn't care at all. It was surreal. None of our mutual friends knew or suspected either, which makes me feel slightly better about my lack of character discernment skills. I never thought that I'd dislike the person I've become. I'm not even a terrible person or anything, I just don't like myself. I won a new bike in 2nd grade during a raffle. I remember I was walking out of school when I heard my name on the intercom saying I won. Holy crap, what a day that was, right before the Christmas holiday too. I thought car accidents only happened to other people, and then I let my friend drive my car. I guess I was kind of right? Alcohol and substance addict. 18 months clean and sober though, so that's pretty cool. Coming home to find out my significant other had cleared their stuff out of my apartment, turned off the cable, internet and phones, and wouldn't answer their cell. We're no longer together. Lost my 32-year-old brother to a sudden heart attack. I thought nothing bad would ever happen to me, and now my family is pretty mashed up. Discovering I was a victim of a horrible home situation growing up. I always thought my family was perfect. A friend of mine who I'd known for half my life, 14 years, was also my roommate. We're also old army pals. He's very dependent on having a girlfriend, so when he starts dating a new girl, everything else ceases to be important. He's always been this way. A couple of months ago, we're still roommates, but he stopped communicating with me slowly over the course of a couple of weeks and starts to sleep over at his girlfriend's house more and more often. I go on a trip to Muscle Shoals, Alabama with my dad on a Friday and return Sunday evening. It was hot as heck, so I went to my friend's room to see if he might have an extra fan I could borrow. I opened his door and all of his stuff was gone. He waited until I was gone for the weekend and skipped out on the lease, and all without saying a word to me. He could have just told me he was moving out, but he just left me holding the bag after avoiding me for a few weeks. I thought I'd done something wrong, but after thinking about it and talking to our other friends, who he also bailed on and wasn't speaking to, I realized he must have had some serious emotional problem with latching onto women and feels like everyone else can screw off when he has a girlfriend. I just hope he's doing all right and everything works out for him. Well, I suspect and kind of hope things didn't work out with that partner, because it seems like they were a pretty bad influence on his life, regardless of how good a person they were. I do hope that it ended and he got help and learned to treat others better, because he and the people around him would benefit from that. Emotional and mental breakdown. Trouble having a baby. We've been trying for years, it's a drag. Not the bedroom part, that part's been great. Getting cheated on. Getting addicted to smoking. Frick. A girl that asked me out? I was so surprised I didn't know what to do. Turned out we weren't compatible and I'm alone again, +1 to life experiences. Brett the Hitman Hart gave me his sunglasses as a kid when he came to my town. Stands to this day as the best moment of my life. Getting caught cheating on a huge test. You never think you'll get caught cheating if you cheat. You're always supposed to be afraid of getting caught cheating. But because you take those precautions to not get caught, you never actually think it's going to happen. But be honest, if you got caught, you wouldn't even know what to do. You'd have an idea, but the minute it happens, you can bet your butt that you'll stumble your words together unless you're a certified pathological liar. God forbid it's the SATs or some other state or national test. The odds are against you too. Once they suspect you of cheating, there isn't crap you can say against it besides, no I didn't. And at that moment you proceed to crap your pants and wait for their verdict on whether or not you should continue your life. 6th grade was frickin' rough, man. I had a ghost poop. I mean, I've heard stories about it, but to experience the crap yet be so clean for the wipe, it really is a haunting experience. Dropped my phone in a goddamn toilet. It happened last summer. I had an iPhone 4 for 3 years before it finally fell into the watery abyss and died. I then finally upgraded to the 5S, which was thankfully half the price from the Verizon upgrade price, because of the iPhone 6 release. I used to make fun of people who dropped their phones in toilets. I mean, I still do, but I used to too. I have a positive one. Graduating high school and college without being on ADD med. I had it drilled into me by my mother and psychologists as a child that I'd never be able to get through high school, let alone college, without being on meds. I'll admit, my grades could be better, but I'm a 3L in law school, and while school has been hard, I've never had to feel trapped inside my own mind, and all of my success has been my own. I mean, I'm kind of the opposite here. My parents told me all through elementary and middle school I was probably ADD and should look into meds. I did just fine, slightly above average in high school, B student in college. I had trouble focusing consistently and was fidgety all the time. But I worked, was in a fraternity, and played club sports. I just assumed I wasn't as focused of a student as I should have been. Went to grad school, that didn't work. Studied and still seemed mediocre. So I went to a psychiatrist with absolutely no expectations just to feel it out. I even told the doctor I'm not expecting anything, but I was tired of just assuming I was completely fine. Ended up being diagnosed with moderate ADHD. I know it's one of the most overdiagnosed disorders, but it's made school and general productivity much easier at times. Being in a horrible relationship. It was when I was first in college. He snuck it up on me with mental and emotional attacks at first. I was already getting sick of that when he pushed me, which was the last straw. I came out of it with some baggage, but I was very lucky not to have it worse. I was a criminal justice major in college, and then one night I went to jail while tripping on mushrooms, and my teacher drove me to said jail. Depression. 2 years or so in, and I really can't remember when it came on. Just sorta snuck up on me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Turning out gay. Now, granted, for 10 or 11 of those years before it happened, I didn't even really have a concept of what gay was. For that span of time, I never thought it would happen to me because I never thought of it at all. But between learning the concept and me finding out that that was me, I didn't ever really think it would happen. Coming out to myself was a gloriously horrible crap show. Up to that point, I was perfectly fine with and supportive of other people who were gay. I didn't see a reason why I shouldn't be, considering that their personal lives weren't any of my business. But when I realized I liked guys, that was my business and I didn't want any of it. I'd always wanted to grow up normal, and get married and have kids of my own and not worry about having to fight for every inch of progress in my life. I mean, I was a middle-class white boy, the jackpot combination of Western society. Who would seriously trade that in? Keep in mind that this was my thought process when I was 14 or 15. I've long since come to my senses. And I'm getting a lot of replies from people currently in this position. I want you to know that I feel for you guys, and it really, really, really does get better. If you ever need support or advice, I strongly recommend checking out the LGBT subs on Reddit. There's a whole network of them catering to a wide array of interests, so even if you don't feel like a stereotypical gay, you can find something that suits you there. You can start at Reddit LGBT. My picture being randomly taken from Google Image, horribly photoshopped to make me bald, and used for an ad for a crappy hair product in Congo. Someone from there recognized my face on the ad because I have a popular blog. Still blows my mind. I still can't believe women actually allowed me to stick my eggplant in them, and for that, I'm grateful. Many of us feel the same way, my friend. It takes us a few rounds to realize that if it keeps happening, maybe we're not the horrible freaks that we think we are. Becoming a smoker, doing substances, being diagnosed with a mental illness, realizing I'm bisexual, and failing uni a couple of times. Dated someone who turned out to be a sociopath and ruined my life. It's better now. Losing my home and everything I owned in a fire. It happened right before Thanksgiving last year. Still haven't really recovered financially or emotionally. Three-way, boom. I got the crap beat out of me, not literally, while traveling abroad. I was in Madrid, drunkenly walking back home, and these guys were like, "Sup, man, you some kind of African?" I told them no. They had a bottle of booze and wanted me to take a shot. I declined and they got all mad and said no Africans should turn them down. One of them grabbed me and I threw a punch, tried to fight them off, but there were 3 of them. I woke up in an alleyway across the street at 5 a.m. or so. They didn't steal anything, just beat me down. Just the dark turn my teen years took. The self-injury, the inner rage hospitalizations, it's like living in a post-apocalyptic world. Sometimes I think back to when I was little. I know that version of me never would have thought that this was who I'd become. I really let that little kid down. I used to be so sure of who I was, what I'd do, where I was going. Everyone always said I was smart and that I looked like I had my crap together, but the truth is I haven't been that right since I was 6. My parents divorced and no one really knows what that does to a kid who's quiet and out of the way. I lost my confidence. I wasn't as good as before, I had to fake it. Be someone else at school for attention. After so long at faking, you don't really know who you are anymore. You could be anyone. Your self-image gets all smudged. Anyway, long story short, too late I know, all of this is on me now. People say the past dies, but it doesn't really. It breathes on my skin, and I have to find a way to move ahead, regardless of what happened. Because it's death to stay behind, and to watch everyone else move ahead in life without you. That I would lose a lot of my self-confidence. It's a long story, but I'm currently trying to force myself to become better and believe in myself. I was in high school walking home drunk after a party, holding an empty handle of Fireball whiskey. I was stumbling all the way home for 2 miles and cars were passing and honking. Drunk as I was, my brain couldn't figure out what they were trying to tell me. To my luck, a cop turned his sirens on and pulled me to the curb. I sat there laughing my butt off while he called my parents to pick me up. I was once caught doing the deed in the park with someone I was cheating with. She was the girlfriend of my friend at school. At about 8 in the evening, while we were doing the good old doggy behind a wall deep inside the park, a guy approached us and handcuffed the both of us immediately. We both literally cried in front of the police guy to set us free by bribing him money and our mobile phones. At first he said, "Son, that's not how it works here. Wait for the police cars and we'll settle these at the station. Also, I may file charges on you for trying to bribe a police officer." After about an hour of negotiation and after we showed him all of our valuable things and offered it to him as a bribe, the fricking truth was revealed. The police guy was not police. After taking all of our money and phones, he made us raise our hands after he removed the handcuffs and made us turn around. After a couple of seconds, we were both crying with fear from the thought of catching a bullet in the back. And then the guy just ran away, laughing, and yelled, "You lusty motherfrickers got what you deserve. Doing the deed in the park? Ha ha!" Frick. I did get what I deserved for cheating. I'll never do it again. I still remember that guy's face. We were both 17 when this happened. I regret having a girlfriend before high school ended. Too bad it was only a month before we graduated. Actually falling in love with someone. I just never understood how people could get so vulnerable and depend on their significant other that much emotionally. I accidentally took too many substances and ended up in hospital for about 2 or 3 days. I had a tooth abscess and it was the most painful thing I've experienced so far. The dentist gave me antibiotics, but they'd take a while to kick in. I was taking ibuprofen, but it wasn't helping, so I started taking it with some paracetamol and that worked. So I carried on doing that, but throughout the day it started to work less and less, so I was taking them closer together. It got to the point where there was only an hour or 2 between taking them. The thought crossed my mind that I was taking too many, but I was in too much pain to care. Next day, my mum asks me how I'm feeling and how many tablets I took the day before, and she says I probably took way too many, but I think nothing of it. Cut to a few hours later, and I've been in bed all day being ill. So we head to the A&E where I get admitted because the levels in my liver are high and they want to monitor me. My cheek had also become swollen, so there was talks of being transferred to another hospital for surgery. I had 2 doctors check me over, repeatedly asked if I'd attempted to end things, and told I'd need to see the psych team, but I was discharged before that happened. I never thought I'd end up in hospital, let alone for something like that. Sunday, I was driving down the road and a snake crawled out from under my sun visor. I'm very thankful that the author of this comment could send it to us from beyond the grave, because I'm assuming they're dead. If that crawled out near me while I was driving, my reaction would probably end in me either throwing myself out the door or flipping my car and turning it into a crashing fireball on the side of the road. Or both. Having your bedroom life almost completely die immediately after getting married was pretty surreal. I never thought it would happen to me and just sort of assumed it was more of a joke people liked to make. I never thought a person could change so quickly and so drastically. I was severely depressed pretty much ever since I can remember. At 17-ish, I dropped out of high school and I joined the National Guard and went through infantry school, thinking it would make me tougher and stronger. I planned to get a college education with the benefits. Well, they gave me no money for school, so I paid out of pocket, and I never went to class, so I dropped out. I did nothing. For most of my childhood, my dad was making a lot of money, 4-year degree from a prestigious school, and then a law degree from another prestigious school. My mum had 2 degrees as well. We lived very well for a while, but now my dad is jobless, my parents split up, and I live with my mum and little sister. I figured if they couldn't succeed in life, how could I? Well, now I'm on my way. I don't make a ton of money, but I make a decent amount for someone living at home with no expenses. I'm 21. I started an internship with an old business friend of my dad's, meaning to learn a little about IT. I figured I could do the dirty work in exchange for some knowledge. Well, my dad's friend liked me, as did all of my co-workers. They offered me a full-time position. I get up every morning, I get dressed, and I go to work at my desk. Most people abhor the idea of wearing a suit and sitting at a desk, but I love it. I feel good. There have been some bumps. My girlfriend of 2 years left me. I fell back into a small episode of not treating myself well, but I'm holding in there. We used to spend every day together. Now you know what I do? I go to the gym, I work on computers. I just built my first gaming PC yesterday, actually. I don't see my mum cry because we can't afford oil for heat, or because she can't give my sister lunch money. Life is stable and it's on an upward path. Every day gets a little better. I get a little stronger, a little bigger. I learn a little more and I get closer and closer to success. So that's my I never thought it would happen to me experience. I never thought I'd be happy. What common knowledge went way over everyone's head? That there are no tigers in Africa. I was on safari in Tanzania, and 2 others in the truck were discussing how excited they would be to see tigers. I told them there weren't any, and they looked all disbelieving and crestfallen, like I was spoiling their fun. They had to check with the guide. I have a twin sister. I'm a guy. You'd be surprised how often I get asked if we're identical. Do you say, no, her Johnson is bigger? Started working as a service plumber, and I can't believe how many people are surprised when you say don't put grease down the drain. That's something I grew up with. The mason jar under the sink where you dumped the grease out of the pan. Too many people don't know that it shouldn't go down the drain. Okay, so some frequently asked questions. Number 1, what does grease do to my pipes? Grease, fats, and oils stick to the side and solidify. This causes the inside diameter to decrease and leaves behind a sticky, uneven surface that stuff can't slide over easily. This is especially bad if you use a garbage disposal. Question 2. What do I do with the grease if I can't dump it down the drain? Trash or a jar? Some people save it for cooking, some use a jar to prevent their trash from smelling, some simply dump it outside in their yard. Wipe the pan with a paper towel to further decrease what goes down the drain. Question 3. What about toilets? Crap and crap paper, nothing else. No wipes, not even the flushable ones, are safe. No tampons, no pads, no diapers, no johnnies. And finally, does hot water help? Not nearly as much as you think. Enough hot water will flush out almost anything, and liquid soap can help too, but in my opinion, it's easier and faster to just use a jar or the trash. I'm not sure how much our viewers are learning from this, but the narrator is getting loads of what are apparently just common sense facts of life. Now I know I shouldn't just be tipping all of my oil down the sink and should maybe get a plumber to check my pipes. So growing up, I always saw the videos of sea turtles or other animals suffering, disfigured, or killed by plastic soda holder rings not being cut before being thrown out. This, of course, stuck with me, and so when I worked in a hospital kitchen, I'd collect the rings from the soda restock on the shift and simply slice each ring. One day my coworker asked why I did that. I explained, and he just stood there for a moment and went, I never thought of that. My mind was blown. I thought it was common knowledge that these things really jacked up wildlife. He then proceeded to tell all of our coworkers, and I was further shocked that over half of them also didn't seem to know that this was an issue. Apparently, a lot of people don't know that pickles come from cucumbers. I've seen a lot of comments like this on Reddit. They're called pickles, as in pickled cucumber. My friend is also allergic to cucumbers. She ordered a sandwich and told the girl she had a cucumber allergy, and she got pickles in her sandwich and an extra on the plate. We were like, we said no cucumbers, and the waitress said, I know, that's a pickle. When I was a kid, I thought that when people got hurt, it was normal to get a shot, like a syringe. Turns out I have hemophilia, and my mum was really good at making me not feel like I was different. I used to work at a grocery store with a floral and gift department. We also handled balloons. Helium was going through a shortage at the time, and as a retail supplier, we were on lower priority from medical and military purchases. So there was about an 8-month period where we were completely out of helium. I had some version of this conversation at least 4 times. Can I get some party balloons, please? I can blow you up some balloons, but they won't float. Why not? We're out of helium at the moment. Why can't you just use air? I can use that, but they won't float. Why not? No helium. About 5 seconds of stupid face and silence followed by, what's helium? That dogs chase animals. I see so many people giving away their dogs because they're chasing my chickens. They're prey-driven animals. That's literally what most of them were made to do. How mummies were made. Growing up, I was obsessed with ancient Egypt and mummies. Even better, my dad worked as a mortician and would casually tell me how the things they did prevented decay. I wound up doing a presentation in 2nd grade about the process. I couldn't understand why I got sent to the counselor after that. Funnily enough, I'm now in school for archaeology and going on a dig soon. Seriously? I read a ton of books when I was a kid that went into excruciating detail about the mummification process. They know kids love that crap. The geography of the world. I was shocked that a lot of people in my campus thought that Singapore was in Europe. One of my friends thought Mexico was in Europe. I made fun of her all day. Then she recalled the time I said the Nile was in Africa, and with a very serious tone she said, "The Nile is in Egypt, idiot." That the moon can be visible in the daytime. Like, how can you go through life never noticing that? I had this conversation with my mother-in-law. My 2-year-old son said, "Noon," pointing to the sky, and I translated for him, and my mother-in-law says, "Silly boy, the moon is only out at night." Her face was priceless, like he didn't know the words, but he looked at her like, "Okay, but counterpoint, it's right there." Indian is not a language. In India, we have 30+ major languages and hundreds of local dialects. A pony is not a baby horse. I see this revelation a few times a year on the internet. A baby horse is a foal. A pony is a small horse, typically a few different breeds. As a general rule, if an animal's proportions are the same as a full-sized version, you're looking at a small adult, not a child. You can spot a baby horse or foal because they're super gangly and awkward, just like human teenagers. How to use an apostrophe. It's disturbingly common for people to automatically add in an apostrophe when they pluralize a word. Don't put laundry softener in your towel load. The towels will retain it and be unable to absorb water properly. If you've done this already, you may need to wash your towels several times without softener to get it all out. That just because someone speaks a different language, it doesn't mean they're deaf or hard of hearing. Speak slower? Absolutely. Speak 50 decibels louder than normal? Unnecessary. The universal English-speaking tourist symptom. Getting angry that people aren't understanding you and just saying the same thing louder and louder until you're red in the face. "Where can I get some chips, mate?" The print screen button on the keyboard takes a screenshot and loads it into the clipboard. That narwhals aren't really a thing. My parents thought I'd read some fake online article because in what world would a unicorn whale exist? After a few minutes of looking it up on their own, they realized that these weird creatures are in fact real, and their horn is actually one giant tooth or tusk. They can sometimes have two. That reduce, reuse, recycle is an order of operations, not just a phrase. That girls should tinkle after doing the deed. My roommate just got a UTI, and when asked if she peed after doing it, she asked why would she do that? Basic human anatomy. My wife thought that the berries resided directly to the left and right of the twig in male anatomy, like engines on a jet plane. Chickens lay eggs without a rooster being around to breed them. It's weird how many people don't know this. That you have to wash your butt in the shower and put on deodorant every day to keep from smelling like a swamp in the summer. Mixing two common household cleaners, bleach and ammonia, makes chloramine gas. I saw some memes saying to mix them as it makes a super cleaner, and I hope that no one bought into it. Warning label. So to add how dangerous this is, chloramine gas is lethal. Breathing it in causes irritation in the lungs and will cause chemical pneumonia. This isn't like breathing in car exhaust and just passing out and not being alive anymore. This hurts a lot. And while I've got your attention, another similar thing people do is running engines and generators in garages. Gas is the invisible killer. The Pelican Man. I used to visit my grandparents' place in Sarasota, Florida as a kid. There was a bird sanctuary there run by the Pelican Man, a bird rehabilitator who had minor fame in the Sarasota metro area. I idolized him. One day when I was about 18, I got to meet him and talk to him. I was over the moon starstruck by him. I was so excited to go home to North Carolina and tell the other kids in my class all about how I met the Pelican Man and how he talked to me. I thought they'd react as if I'd gotten to meet Britney Spears or Harrison Ford. I remember feeling really deflated when I was just met with blank stares because no one outside of Sarasota knew who he was. I should note that his facility closed after his death in the early 2000s, but has since reopened with the same aim of education and bird rehabilitation under the name of Save Our Seabirds. If you're in Sarasota, definitely pay it a visit, and you can read about the Pelican Man himself on their website. Prom is from promenade. Is that like lemonade? That the misuse of antibiotics is a legitimate issue. My girlfriend told me that she never finished her prescriptions because they give her extras, and then if she's feeling sick in the future, she'll take the extras. If you don't finish antibiotics, you're helping create drug-resistant bacteria. Every time I mention the fact that you can get ebooks and audiobooks online through your library, via Libby or Overdrive or some other borrowing services depending on what your library signed up for, there's always someone who's getting it as knowledge for the first time and is amazed. It's a great service, but they do a really bad job of advertising it. Catholicism is Christian. That Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Just for comparison, New Mexico license plates used to read New Mexico, USA because so many people thought they weren't from the US. Toasters have a tray at the bottom that you can remove to clean the breadcrumbs out. I knew about this, but I also never clean it. When driving, there's something in between gassing and braking. You can coast to let the car drag and slow a little before turns, exits, or to merge into slower traffic. That birth control being 99% effective doesn't mean you'll get pregnant 1 out of 99 times doing the deed. It means that, on average, if 100 couples do the deed for 1 year, then one of them will get pregnant. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I live in the Midwest around a lot of farmers and country folk. A whole bunch of us went out for a friend's birthday the night before Easter. The bar was playing one of those Charlton Heston movies where he was portraying Jesus, and I made a comment to my boyfriend about how I found it funny that everyone in the movie was white, considering this story takes place in the Middle East supposedly some 2,000 years ago. One of the guys in our group whipped around like someone just told him a nuclear bomb went off, and was like, "What do you mean? Of course Jesus was white. Haven't you seen all the paintings in church?" The long and short of it, I had to explain and show him that different cultures portray Jesus in the skin tone of their choosing, when in reality, if he existed, he was probably pretty dark-complexioned dude. I'm pretty sure I ruined this guy's night. Browsing the threads of Twitter has revealed to the narrator all too many times that there are many, many people who cling to Jesus being white like it's the one thing keeping their lives together, and react aggressively to any claim otherwise, despite the fact that it doesn't change the contents or lessons of the good book one iota. They should probably think about why it makes them so angry. It doesn't matter. Woo boy, I'm a nutritionist and work in retail, so I have hundreds of these. It was a steep learning curve being exposed to the public that made me realize things I thought were glaringly obvious really aren't. So, a list of the ones that stick out to me right now. That oil is fat. I've honestly had customers say they take oil as a protein supplement or ask if oil has carbs. That fruit has both sugar and carbohydrates. That calories can only come from carbs, protein, or fat, and alcohol. Like all food is made up of those three things. That's it. That's the only options. That nutrients come from food, and that's the whole point of eating. Customers often think they can do crappy meal replacement shakes or 500-cal non-food diets for months at a time and wonder how they get deficient in basic nutrients like iron or magnesium. That fish oils come from fish. Yes, I'm serious, people ask me this all the time. That flour is made of ground-up grains. And my personal favorite, that Himalaya is not a country. My customer will say, I need Himalayan pink salt. I say, sure, it's just in this bulk bin here. It says this is from Pakistan. Do you have one from Himalaya? The Himalaya are mountain ranges that stretch across a few countries, including Pakistan, where the salt is mined. Oh, are you really sure? I stare into the camera like The Office. That the word scuba is actually an acronym. Also, laser and radar. That having snow in the winter doesn't mean global warming isn't real. That when you make a Fantastic Four movie, you should try to make it good. That just because you have your turning signal on, it doesn't mean just go ahead and cut somebody off. Finland fought hard in World War II, and on both sides, because Stalin wanted Finland. That pound cake is not just a name, but a recipe, traditionally a pound each of flour, sugar, butter, eggs, and a dash of vanilla and salt. I was having a conversation with a friend about what desserts could be made with just what's in the normal pantry, and I mentioned pound cake, and he asked for the ingredients in the recipe. I'd assumed everyone knew pound cake was a recipe, so I found this request somewhat odd. He had never heard of it being a recipe, started asking other people over the next few days, and no one I asked knew about it. Polyglottism. In my country, most people speak at least 3 languages – English, Malay, Mandarin, or other Malay dialects – on a daily basis. My family and I can speak 4 languages – English, Malay, Mandarin, and Hokkien – fluently. I'm also able to speak basic Cantonese, Korean, and Tagalog. So I'm confused when people treat my multilingualism as some sort of special intellectual power. I was born and raised in a multilingual society. There's nothing special about my linguistic ability. Frankenstein is the name of the doctor who made the monster, not the monster itself. Africa is not a country, it's a continent. But South Africa is a country. That data is the plural form of datum. Trebuchets are the superior siege machine. You'd be surprised at how many didn't actually know this. Why the sky is blue. This debate keeps popping up everywhere I seem to go, and without fail everyone agrees it's because it reflects the ocean. In fact, blue light is scattered in all directions by tiny molecules of air in the Earth's atmosphere. Blue is scattered more than the other colors because it travels as shorter, smaller waves. That's why we see a blue sky most of the time. How about one that isn't common knowledge but probably should be? If you're like me and put something on your computer to watch as you go to bed, knowing the shutdown timer command is great. Open the command prompt or in Windows 10, simply type into the search bar shutdown-s-t 3600. The 3600 is how many seconds after you enter the command the computer will shut down. -3600 equals 1 hour. You can do whatever time you want. It saves electricity and keeps your bright monitor from waking you up later. That bees are female. The ones you see anyway. There are drone bees who impregnate the queen, but the worker bees are all female. The same with ants or any hive insect. The husband and I discussed this once and it completely blew his mind. I didn't realize he legit didn't know, so I let out a chuckle. And he thought I was making fun of his ignorance and got super angry. Now it's a joke between us, but I was seriously confused. And this isn't the same for all hive animals. Termites are not the same. They're a mix of male and female, but the queen secretes a hormone that suppresses reproduction amongst the workers. Thank you for subscribing to Bug Facts. Huh, 2 things. So yeah, the narrator also thought that all bees that weren't the queen were the male ones, and as creepy and alien as most insects are to us, termites just seem that bit weirder now, because apparently they're one dead queen away from going into a mating frenzy. Or maybe that's not how it works. The more you know. That Britain isn't a separate country from England. When I moved to the US, I lost count of the number of people who couldn't understand that I was both English and British. What really messed with their heads was when I pointed out I was also European. Please explain this to the people who make Outlander. I'm so tired of the whole "the Scots are fighting the Brits" crap. People, please, the Scots are British too. New England isn't a state, it's the regroupment of Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Apparently I didn't know that 2 weeks ago. Evolution. I had no idea it would be considered controversial. Happened to mention it to a coworker like he asked about the book I was reading and it was on some biology crap, and among other things I said blah blah about how these evolved to do this, and the next thing I know he's flipping right the frick out on me like, "You can't seriously believe that nonsense." And then he bullied me the whole rest of the time I worked there and even recruited a couple of easily manipulated, dim-witted idiots who worked there to bully me too. You'd think he'd calm down after the first couple of hours, you know? At least by the next day, but nope. He stayed furious forever, over me mentioning stuff that's taught from like grade 4 or something onwards. And I didn't even suspect that a moment of chit-chat about ants or something, I forget what the book was about, could erupt into any sort of problem. It was really startling, like I opened a whole can of peanut brittle and snakes popped out. I just don't get it. Either you accept the scientific method allows us to figure things out and experts can inform the rest of us about their field's accumulated knowledge, or you don't. And if you don't accept it, then how can you trust airplanes or heart surgeons or prescriptions or gas appliances or anything else done using science? If you do, then how do you justify trusting, say, the heart surgeon, but not the paleontologist or geologist? I'd met religious folks before, of course, but as far as I knew, they justified discrepancies between scripture and facts, like God causing evolution and that passage being a metaphor, rather than deciding the discrepancies mean fact is not fact. The guy's intense horror at the very idea that someone might trust science was a whole other thing from how normal religious people think. I hope. Maybe more people than I know feel the way he does, but they're just smoother and keep it quiet. And there's something bad the incident's done to me now. Now I'm less likely to trust religious people. Like, I try to avoid telling them anything about me because I'm afraid of another freakout, and I don't know what all the things are that they might find triggering. That Northern Ireland is a country, that it's within the UK and people use sterling there. That Titanic absolutely happened and it isn't just a movie. When you drive up to a big box store like Walmart, Kroger, whatever, one side says home or something similar, and one says fresh or something similar. Home is the non-food stuff, normally starting with a pharmacy section. Fresh is the food size. My partner had no idea and had just been guessing at which side to go in for the past decade. He just assumed people knew which side because they'd been there before. When I visited the US and Florida when I was 13, I was asked by an American woman, "What's it like living in an igloo?" I'm from Canada. I couldn't respond because I was baffled. We live in ice castles, lady. Do your research. You get fat when you eat more calories than you burn over a long period of time. Everyone seems to think it's because of carbs or fats or your thyroid, or because Mercury is in retrograde or some other mystical, mysterious BS. Computers. I grew up around computers and watched my mum use ours at home often, and I picked up on how to use it, troubleshoot, etc. Apparently having common knowledge of computers is a rare trait that a lot of people just don't have. It's also apparently not common knowledge anymore for people to be able to count change, read an analog clock, or know the difference between north, south, east, and west. Also, this one's probably not common knowledge, but it's something that I learned recently that blew my mind a bit. You ever wonder the best way to tell which side the gas tank is on without getting out of your vehicle? If you look at the gas tank meter, you'll see the picture of a gas tank, and there's usually a little triangle right next to it. That triangle points to whatever side the gas tank is on. That Christians are Jews who believe Christ was the Son of God, and Muslims are Jews who believe in Muhammad as a prophet. They all still worship the same God, the God of Abraham. Most people think it's 3 different gods. It's almost as if they never actually read their religious texts. People having their lives figured out. Took me a lot longer to realize that most, if not all adults are not sure what the frick they're doing. What crazy self-own did a patient try to pretend wasn't their fault? An Elder Wand replica, as in the Elder Wand from Harry Potter. It was jammed right up their rear end. I really had to resist asking whether they'd tried Accio Wand. I used to work psych, and we had this regular patient who we all knew quite well. Schizophrenia, paranoid kind of thing. He was always complaining about spider eggs in his brain. One time, upon admission, he complained that his butt was hurting because he sent a rat up there to retrieve a message. Of course, no one believed him, but we had to check anyway. Sure enough, there was a rat tail hanging out of his rectum. The patient's biggest concern was that he got the important message from the rat, who was, of course, dead and also non-verbal regardless, we presume. On Thanksgiving, I had a pain almost literally inside my butt, but more towards my perineum. Ingrown hair, abscess kind of thing. I went to the ER since it was a holiday and I could hardly sit. When they asked what the issue was and where it was located, I said, in a sensitive area. When they pressed further, I said, my perineum. Oh, the nurse replied, you mean your taint? We all had a good laugh and I had my taint lanced. Patient very hesitant with what was actually up, so went in for an x-ray. Unmistakable shape of a Barbie doll right up his butt. So, emergency surgery and it's removed. He came to and saw his wife at his bedside. He panicked, and when she went to the ladies, he asked the nurses not to tell her what's happened. She comes back in and one of the nurses brings back the crap-smeared Barbie doll in a small plastic bag. His wife glares at him. I once saw a high school-aged kid come in with a dinner candle stuck in his rectum. He reportedly was using it to reach an itch. Apparently, the itch was in his spleen because that thing was deep. His mom told me the story and how she had previously asked him to not itch himself with other things of hers. I didn't ask for any more details. I honestly think she believed that he was just really itchy. Well, folks, it's been a while since the narrator has done a medical video, and honestly, I was beginning to delude myself into thinking that there weren't actually that many stories about guys who got curious and tripped and fell onto things that then happened to go up their butts. But there we go. 4 out of 5 of our first stories all have that exact specific subject, and all 5 are kind of about troublesome objects and butts, so if I worded the criteria correctly, I could probably pass this off as a perfect run. Except the word perfect really has no place near any of this. I'm a corrections officer. I had an inmate complain about a pain in his Johnson. Took him to the facility hospital. He had screws jammed into his pee-pee hole. About 14, if I recall correctly. They took the screws out of him and put him on some psych meds. About a week later, he cut his own member off with a broken mirror and flushed it down the loo. That part of his anatomy was never recovered. Sent a male patient into the bathroom to collect a number 1 sample. Took him much longer than expected. He had misunderstood and given a splooge sample. Oh, I've got one. I had my nose straightened and septum shaved after I broke it like an idiot. I woke up after anesthesia feeling like the frickin' man. After about a minute of being awake, I tore out my IV, stood up, and started walking out of my room because I was going to walk home, about 3 miles, and finish that one mission in Heroes of Might and Magic 3. I walked past a nurse and she said, "You're bleeding." "Haha, no, I feel amazing," I responded. I kept walking until I got to the elevator, and I saw my reflection in the metal. My face is bandaged up, with black and blue bruising leaking out from under the white fabric. My eyes are bloodshot, and I generally look like crap. But hey, that doesn't matter, right? My immediate next memory is waking up sometime later, back in my bed in the hospital with the IV inserted into the other arm, and I'm strapped to the bed. Turns out I'd been on a morphine drip, and that's why I felt like Superman. My parents start yelling, and I'm like, "What you flimmin' walking but?" Turns out I gave myself a concussion while I collapsed while waiting for the elevator. On the bright side, that's how I found out painkillers are amazing and that they'd help me survive a year of intense manual labor when I ran away from home. On the downside, I was addicted to painkillers. I was 12 and I had an infection in the old man purse, and tried to hide it, hoping it would just go away. I was walking funny and it eventually turned kind of purple. My parents got very worried and spoke to me about why I was walking funny. Finally, I had to show my mum my crazy, swollen berries, and we went to the doctors the next day. While I was there, I explained the situation. They needed to do tests, so I was given morphine so they could ultrasound my nads. There was this super attractive nurse doing the ultrasound too. She got clear jelly all over my downstairs area. It still hurt, but man, if that wasn't one of the first rock-hard eggplants I'd ever got, I don't know what was. I was so weirded out by the whole situation. First, I get an infection down there. Then I'm given morphine. Then I get jelly slathered all over my splooge wallet. Then I see one of the prettiest girls in my life and she touches my disgusting, morbid sack. I tried desperately hard not to smirk because it still felt kind of good, also being ticklish, but every couple of seconds I'd giggle and smile, but then a quarter second later it would hurt and be painful. So this was all just kind of like a roller coaster, especially being so young. It went on like that for at least 5 minutes. I don't really remember what the problem was, but if I recall correctly, it had a bacterial infection. But that cleared right up and I was fine. I think the only lasting effect from that was that women with short hair are still very attractive to me. Doctors and nurses, if you're reading this, thank you, but holy crap, that was confusing. In short, had an infection and had a hands-on experience that I'll never forget. One time a lady came into the ER with itching and pain in her hoo-ha. She said she had used some garlic as a natural way to fight a yeast infection. And no, it wasn't from eating the garlic. Not hidden from us, but from her boyfriend. She came in with $9 grand in cash which she had wrapped in plastic and shoved up her hoo-ha. Her natural acids in there had disintegrated the plastic wrap, and she had to be anesthetized to get it all out. The 10-inch long cucumber that the male patient had tripped and fallen on, which was distending his abdomen on the other side of his body. The patient said nothing until the CT scan showed the mass. I had a lecturer who told me about a homeless guy who regularly presented to ED complaining stomach pain. He'd get an abdomen x-ray which showed a bunch of wire inside his abdo. He'd be added to the next day's emergency theatre list, get a hot meal and a bed for the night, before hoofing it the next morning and self-discharging before surgery. He'd purposefully pierced his belly with a wire coat hanger and fed the thing inside himself so he could go around to hospitals and score a free hotel room for the night. And by the way, this isn't a place with universal healthcare, so even though he was a regular and the hospital staff knew him by name, they couldn't refuse treatment and couldn't force him to have the coat hanger removed either. Good lord. The narrator came here for fun, silly stories about people with things up their butts, not sad stories of the desperate measures some people will go to get a good night's rest and a meal. This is heartbreaking. And before people go saying this is why you shouldn't have free healthcare, no. Just no. We have free healthcare so that down-on-their-luck folks who need medical attention can get it without being refused service or being put further into crippling debt. The occasional case of a guy like this abusing the system is just the price we have to pay for that. Oh god, I need to tell this story. My uncle is a retired surgeon. One day an elderly man gets to the ER with the handle of a paintbrush up his butt. We're talking decades ago in a countryside hospital where sticking things up your butt was a big taboo. Go figure in an old man's mind. So, word spreads among the staff and doctors and nurses enter the poor man's room pretending to do preliminary checks and ask him why he's there. By chance, he also has a scratch on his wrist, and that was his answer to everyone. Oh, you see, I have this scratch here and I wanted to have it checked. Oh, it wasn't the patient, it was his awful relatives. They came into my office to ask me to see this old guy because he had, quote, accidentally cut himself and wanted some stitches. I told them I couldn't do any stitching with a lack of sterile equipment, but would gladly apply some steri strips if the wound allowed it, as long as they brought the man to the office. That request was denied. They kept insisting that I see him at their home. Fine. I loaded up my bag to go and check on the old fellow. I found him in his bed, conscious but refusing to talk, with various superficial knife wounds on his stomach and a gigantic hematoma in the process of swelling up on his forehead. I flipped out and got the relatives to finally talk. They said the man had fought with his sister and decided to repeatedly slam a hammer into his forehead and then had tried to disembowel himself with a kitchen knife. They didn't call an ambulance because they were, and I quote, ashamed and didn't want to deal with assisting the man in a faraway hospital. I gave them 15 minutes to get their crap together and either call an ambulance or get the man to the hospital themselves. Never found out what became of him. When I was in the hospital, there was a homeless guy there that was beyond drunk. This guy was next-level crap. He had 2 doctors, 3 nurses, a cop, and an orderly trying to keep him restrained. He thought he was forming coherent sentences, but the words, "I'm not fricking drunk," came out several times. Along with, "I don't even drink alcohol, it was rainwater." They kept telling him that they'd sedate him if he wouldn't stop his wild behavior, and I'm guessing they couldn't because of his blood alcohol level. Every 20 minutes he'd get riled up again and the same thing would start over. Eventually, he admitted to alcoholism and the cop left and the 2 doctors looked after the man. The guy even ripped out his IV. Well, I'm a radiographer, and sometimes you see those objects stuck deep inside patients. I've seen a spray can, a screwdriver, a potato, or the proper adult toy gone way too far. But the more surprising one was a woman that used a Coke 33 centiliter glass as a plaything. She didn't have enough, so she used another. I guess she felt nothing due to excitement because she pushed the first bottle into the uterus, breaking the cervix by pushing with the second bottle. Ugh. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Sister's friend is a nurse and told the story of a man who came into the ED clutching his abdomen and complaining of severe abdominal pain. He was acting suspicious and kept changing his story, symptoms, site of the pain. My sister's friend and a few other nurses suspected something wasn't right, and after maybe an hour or so, he confessed the true cause of his pain. He had inserted a deflated full-size basketball, a very cheap one, into his butt and pumped it up. Amazingly, he somehow managed to pump the ball up to the point where it popped inside his butt. The popping is what caused his pain, but the kicker was he hadn't come to the ED to treat the pain. The basketball was still inside his butt, and after the pop, a combination of pain, presumable swelling, and it still being semi-inflated meant that he was unable to retrieve it himself. She didn't go into detail as to how the basketball was retrieved, but I can't imagine that it was very pleasant. In short, Guy put a basketball up his butt and inflated it until it popped, and he was unable to retrieve it himself. Pregnancy. A patient arrived into the ER triage. She's in her early 30s and complaining of lower abdominal pain and nausea. The British triage nurse, who tells the story best, says the poor woman was bent over double in her chair. From all accounts, she was a relatively skinny individual. In order to make sure there was no emerging emergency, our triage nurse has a peek at the patients downstairs. She was greeted by a crowning baby. The nurse bolts up and runs into the ER and grabs my attending. "Sir, she's up the duff." Confused, and there was a brief, "who's on first?" exchange before my attending and I just ran in, just in time to catch a healthy 8-pound baby before it hit the floor. There were several other incidents similar to this, but none so pronounced. The mother denied being pregnant right up until the moment her baby girl was on her chest. In short, duff denied, nurse pried, mum lied, baby cried. I've read just enough stories like this in my time here to be able to say that no matter what the percentage of pregnant women is that somehow deceive themselves into thinking otherwise, it's way bigger than you'd like to hope. Absolutely insane. I watched this one guy in the ER. The guy walks to the back with a couple of towels on his shoulder. He looks like blood is starting to seep through the towels. The nurse asks, "What happened?" She starts to take the towel off and her face turns from a smile to very serious. Calls over the doctor and others. The guy said, "I was cutting some branches overhead with a chainsaw. It got caught on one of the branches and came back on my shoulder." Now there's basically a crowd around the man and they're getting ready to take him back for surgery. He'd basically cut into his own chest with a chainsaw. Not life-threateningly bad at that point since he walked in. I was in awe, to be honest. I always wondered how he shut that damn thing off before straight up murdering himself. My best friend's mother is a nurse. One night, as a joke, my friend decides to show her One Man, One Jar, which is a hilarious thing to watch with your mum, right? Anyway, this woman is just deadpan the entire video and follows it up with, "Oh, is that it? Okay." Dumbfounded, we ask what she could have seen that could possibly be grosser than that, right? She proceeds to tell us in detail about a man who stuffed a hamster into a Johnny, then shoved the rat bag up his butt. The hamster then, out of suffocation, chewed through the protection, clawed its way deep inside him, where it drowned in a mixture of blood and number 2 after shredding his colon in a frenzy. Like the messed up, real-life version of that one South Park joke. She was part of the team that had to retrieve said rodent. His mum always seemed like a demure housewife, but damn, that lady has seen some crap. My sister is in organ donation. The biggest obstacle is people thinking, doctors will let me die and steal my organs. First of all, if you die, your organs are useless. They can take corneas, long bones, ligaments, and sometimes skin from dead bodies, but those aren't rare or in demand. Everything they do to save your organs would also save your life. You need to be brain dead but have a steady heartbeat on a machine that breathes for you to donate organs. Usually, the doctors need to work for hours to save an organ donor, which is an effort they don't take on a non-donor. She's been called to cases where the doctors thought the patient was dead meat. She didn't get called unless they're brain dead. But the doctors keep working because it's an organ donor. They'd have called a non-donor on arrival and sent them to the morgue. But they keep working and the person's revived or recovered, and sometimes fully recovers. If you want everything done on you to give you a chance, sign your donor card. I signed mine after she told me about that. She signed hers. If you're a non-donor, the doctors will just give up on you if they think you're a lost cause. I had a patient who, instead of treating her choice to have an artificial donor insemination as an empowerment move, had everyone else convinced that her child had a deadbeat dad who took off when he was born. She felt that this made her look empowered because she stood up as a single mom. The now school-aged kid knew about this but was horrible at lying. When I asked him about what life was like at home, he said something along the lines of, good, just me and mom. She's a good mom. Pretend dad ran away. There's no real dad though. When my sister started out working as a doctor, she got one of these, I guess, pretty regular adolescent boys with their sister's toy in the butt. She sent me a picture of the x-ray too. He said he fell on it, of course. I'm a neurologist in Spain. We were brought a patient with an acute stroke in the morning. Asking him about how it happened, he said he'd gone out for an early morning jog when he fell down unable to move the left part of his body. An hour later, a nurse asked him the same question, and he gave another different fake answer. Turns out he'd woken up early, left his house, and he was doing the deed with a working girl when he suffered the stroke. It was this woman who'd called the ambulance. The tough part was meeting his family. Oh, you know. 70-year-old man, 12-inch hand-carved wooden marital aid normally meant for women, doesn't know how it got up there. You know the rest of the story. Yes, tripped and fell. We know the story like the back of our hands just by the end of this one video. But the real question here is whether this guy carved said implement himself. And how lifelike was it? And was it varnished? I want to know exactly how much work went into this woody before it was unfortunately mistakenly shoved a foot into the man from a very precise angle. Had this patient come in once, you could clearly see she was north of 60, wrinkles with a cute, no-teeth smile. We asked her age. She gave her crooked, cute smile and says, "Son, I'm 40 years, but my grandchildren say I look quite young." I did an internship with a doctor, a dermatologist, and she told me that one day a homeless guy came to the hospital with a bandage on his foot, saying it was painful. The nurses were afraid to take care of him because of the horrible smell, and of course discovered what was under the bandage. The dermatologist was called and she said she did it herself. When she opened it, the foot of the guy just fell off. He got an infection and larvae started to eat his foot. Ugh. Does a semi-rotten sandwich found lodged within the folds of a heartbreakingly obese patient's panniculus during an emergency procedure count? Oh, I have tons of weird stories. When I was a fourth-year medical student doing a rotation at the Veterans Administration Hospital, the patient came into the emergency room complaining of stomach pain. We did an X-ray which showed 2 toothbrushes in his stomach. He explained to us that he had the sensation that there was something on the back of his throat and used his toothbrush to try and get rid of it, and accidentally swallowed the toothbrush. The same thing happened with the second one. We consulted gastroenterology and the toothbrushes were removed via endoscopy. He was admitted to the hospital for observation overnight. The next morning he complained of the stomach pain again. A follow-up X-ray revealed that he had swallowed his entire convenience kit at the hospital, including the small toothbrush, small tube of toothpaste, and even his plastic razor. Needless to say, we called psychiatry for consultation. It turns out this was not the first episode for this guy. He just liked to swallow things. In the summer, my brother and I used to spend our time in the backyard looking for caterpillars and frogs. Given I was 4 years old and I didn't know what I was doing, I thought it would be funny to put a caterpillar down my 2-year-old brother's swim trunks. He didn't feel the caterpillar go down there, so I didn't get the reaction that I wanted from him, so I just forgot about the whole thing and moved on. Later that day, when my mum was changing his diaper, she screamed and saw all of these spikes in his butt that he must have got from the caterpillar when he sat down. Turns out he had an allergic reaction to it, and we had to go to the doctor to get all of those spikes out of his butt. Here's my circus of specimens. A lady presented multiple times requiring admission for systemic infection found to be a weird amoebiasis. ID docs were very confused. This was in the middle of a US suburban area. She was drinking her fish tank water to get sick. A morbidly obese lady came into the ED, altered and obtunded, kept responding to Narcan and then getting obtunded again. 3 fentanyl patches eventually found hidden on the underside of her pendulous chest. A working girl kitted out with what seemed like an assassin's kit, including a large wire garrote, 4 knives, and various poisons in her handbag. And of course, the guy who came in from jail in excited delirium with an uncomfortably large quantity of illegal substances hidden up his butt. Somewhere deep in Alabama, an elderly lady came in and said she was having stomach pain or some kind of pain. When he was examining her, he noticed she had pain near her uterus and female areas. So she got undressed for another exam and she casually said to him, "Now, I do got leaves growing out of my Virginia." He looked and saw that, by God, she did. She'd put a potato down there to hold up her prolapsed uterus. I poked myself with a sharp lead pencil and jabbed my hand and made little dots in the shape of a male member, then connected them with a line. 10 years later, the lines are gone and the dots are still there. Eggplant hand is my nickname, always an eggplant in my hand. Not a doctor, but my friend's sister is. 2 people came into the A&E one night, let's call them A and B. A had cuts around their lower back, upper thighs, and in and around their butt. B had cuts and a shard of glass in their face. Upon admission, they didn't say what the cause of these wounds was. It wasn't until they found traces of number 2 in the second patient's wounds that they said what happened. As it turned out, A had been sitting on a glass table taking a number 2, while B sat directly beneath to watch while they took said movement. The glass table gave way and broke during this spectacle. You might say it was a bloody crappy experience. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.